Prince Rudolph, known as a selfish tyrant and the child of a mistress, finds himself with a legitimate claim to the throne, and therefore a target. As a bright light emanates from an unseen wound, he looks up at his attacker, not with fear, but with confusion. He holds a gilded dagger, yet he does not resist. He simply asks why. The reason becomes clear amidst a spray of blood. He does not resist, because he already knows his own future. The events, however, began several hours prior, at the Scorpio Palace, the residence of the fourth prince within the Baldyke Empire. Inside, the atmosphere is tense. Two men from the palace staff discuss the grim situation. It has been 7 days since Prince Rudolph was poisoned, and things are not looking good. Nearby, two maids overhear the conversation. One whispers callously that it would be nice if the prince would just die, but her companion quietly rebukes her for the thought. Their hushed talk is interrupted as the prince's chamber door swings open. They rush in to find Prince Rudolph sitting up in bed, fully awake. After 7 days of sleep, he has returned. One maid urgently dispatches the other, Maya, to fetch the physician. As news of his awakening spreads like wildfire through the palace, the prince stands, annoyed by the noise. He calmly tells the concerned staff, including Maya and the arriving physician, that he will not die and that they need not worry. The physician immediately begins his examination, kneeling before the prince who sits patiently on his bed. The rest of the household staff watches from a distance, their expressions a mix of disbelief and apprehension. To test his coherence, the physician asks for his name and age. With a steady voice, the boy replies, Rudolph First Baldyke, 14 years old. When asked about his background, he confirms he is the fourth prince of the Baldyke Empire, son of the emperor. He continues with a chillingly blunt assessment of his own life, stating that his mother was a commoner brought in to bear a child for the imperial family. He explains that his siblings and relatives despise him as a mistress's child, and, for that reason, they poisoned him. The staff listens in horror, one crying out for him to stop. He sat on the edge of his bed as the physician and servants took their leave. The doctor, satisfied that there were no immediate problems, advised him to continue resting. The staff offered well wishes for a speedy recovery before departing. Once they were gone, he was left alone in the quiet, spacious room, his gaze fixed on the floor in silent contemplation. His thoughts, however, were on the servants. He knew they were not there to serve him, but to watch him. They would undoubtedly report everything to their true masters. He understood perfectly who those masters were, his brothers and the queen. To them, he was nothing more than a nuisance. Meanwhile, in a palace corridor, two maids walked together, their conversation turning to the prince. One of them, Maya, asked her senior if she also thought Prince Rudolph was acting strangely. Her companion's troubled expression confirmed her suspicions. Maya noted how unnervingly calm he seemed, even though he had almost died. The senior maid worriedly agreed, remarking that with so many spies rumored to be in the palace, no one could know what was truly on his mind. They continued on, speculating that the prince must be consumed by anxiety and fear. Without any allies, he could be assassinated at any time. Unseen by them, behind his bed curtains, the prince trembled. But inside the room, his trembling was not from fear. Staring at his reflection in a basin of water, tears streamed down his face as he made a silent vow. He would not die. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he would live for at least another 10 years. This conviction stemmed from an impossible truth. He knew the future because he had come from it, 300 years into the future, to be precise. He knew the history of this era. The memory had returned to him at the moment of his greatest peril. As he lay on the verge of death from the poison, he recalled everything, the memories of his previous life. He recalled the life he lived before this one, remembering that he was originally born as a simple villager in a rural town, far into the future of the current era. After dying as an ordinary man, his soul had traveled back through time and space, leading to his reincarnation as the fourth prince, Rudolph First Baldyke. In stark contrast to that humble past, his life as the prince, before his memories returned, had been that of a hopeless tyrant. He would throw a fit over things he disliked, such as carrots, and would frequently yell, curse, and make unreasonable demands of his servants. This realization filled him with disgust for his own past stupidity. He now understood that the person he was before regaining his memories was the worst kind of human imaginable. He sat in silence, hunched over in his chair as he pondered how he should live from this moment forward. Outside the window behind him, a cloaked figure appeared. His contemplation was shattered as the assassin burst through the glass. With a dagger drawn, the intruder lunged, but Rudolph, reacting with surprising speed, threw himself to the side to evade the initial strike. Pinning the prince to the floor, the assassin was perplexed by his lack of resistance and fear. The attacker questioned why Rudolph wasn't scared, but quickly dismissed the thought, raising the dagger to deliver the final blow and telling His Highness to prepare himself. Before the assassin could strike, an arrow flew through the air and embedded itself in his shoulder. From the doorway, a guard knelt with his bow drawn as the senior maid ordered the attacker away from the prince. The injured attacker cursed, realizing he had failed, and fled back through the broken window. The guard shouted that he was running and prepared to give chase, but the senior maid stopped him, insisting that the prince's safety was the top priority. With the immediate threat gone, the senior maid rushed to Rudolph's side to ask if he was all right. He calmly waved her and the other maid away, stating that he needed to think and instructing them to leave after cleaning up the glass shards. He lay in bed, a wave of relief washing over him. He was saved. Sitting up, a bead of sweat traced its way down his temple as he acknowledged that the book's contents seemed genuine. The thought of the knife was still terrifying. The assassin had truly intended to kill him. That book was the Wilhelm War Record, his favorite epic poem from his past life. Here, however, it was a history book based on facts from 300 years ago, detailing events like the poison attempt and the very assassination he had just survived. Even knowing it was coming, he never wanted to experience such a thing again. Because of that knowledge, he had been certain he would not perish during that attack. However, the book also foretold a different, unavoidable fate. His gaze drifted to the night sky as he recalled the grim details from the war record. According to the text, the repeated attempts on his life would twist him with suspicion, driving him to murder all of his brothers. This path would ultimately lead to his own death in roughly 10 years, at the age of 25. The book chronicled how he would be known to history as the cruel Emperor Rudolf, a tyrant of unprecedented cruelty. He clutched his head, tormented by the realization that if events proceeded as written, the constant fear and suspicion would shatter his personality, forcing him down that very path. He would be left with nothing, unloved, unneeded by anyone. His end would be one of suffering, cursing the world that had abandoned him. But then, a fire ignited within him. He shot to his feet, defiantly rejecting that future. To hell with that fate, he declared. He would live. He would fight and survive. With his memories of the future, he was certain he could change the course of history. With newfound resolve, he walked to a nearby chest of drawers, retrieving a small, ornate box from within. He opened it, revealing a single coin. He held it in his palm, his thoughts turning to a particular girl and a promise for a day yet to come. This was all part of his plan. His first step to changing history would be to discern who his enemies were and eliminate them. He would resolve every last problem festering within the palace walls. He knew exactly where to begin his purge. The first order of business was to secure the ledger. He immediately summoned his staff. Addressing the senior maid, he explained that his work had been delayed due to his recent sickness and now required her to bring him the ledger of the Scorpio Palace. The senior maid stood in stunned silence. Nearby, Maya watched with concern, her mind racing. It was completely out of character for the prince to suddenly ask for the ledger, and she couldn't help but wonder what was wrong. Prince Rudolph speaks to his senior maid, Tappel. He informs her that he will soon turn 15 and must begin learning his official duties, apologizing for having burdened her with so much work until now. She responds with a gentle expression, suggesting he must be exhausted from the recent assassination attempt. She insists that he can leave the chores to the rest of the staff. He brushes off her concern, stating that he is perfectly fine and simply needs her to bring him the ledger. Tappel reassures him that they are searching for the assassin, putting the full prestige of the imperial palace into the effort. She promises they will find the culprit and urges him to rest. The prince, however, believes the assassin was likely sent by one of his brothers and that the investigation will simply find a random person to blame. He dismisses the thought and repeats his request for the ledger. Before he can continue, Tappel suddenly pulls him into a tight, desperate embrace. In the background, Maid Maya watches, startled by the sudden display of emotion. Tears stream down her face as she cries out, lamenting that His Highness has accepted the grim reality that he and his brothers are destined to kill one another. She pulls back to look him in the eyes, reminding him that she has been his personal maid since he was born, even changing his diapers for his mother. As his personal maid, she swears her unwavering loyalty by the brooch on her uniform. Standing before him, Tappel makes a solemn vow. No matter what dangers lie ahead, she will always be on his side. She pleads for Prince Rudolph to rely on her. The prince looks down, his eyes hidden in shadow. In that moment, a horrifying truth crashes down upon him. It was Tappel, the one who was lining her pockets behind the scenes. Her devoted expression twists into a sinister, greedy smile as the prince's eyes widen in shocked realization. He recalls the historical war record, which always depicts Mrs. Tappel standing faithfully beside him, the so-called cruel emperor. The realization dawns on him that such a venomous woman, who uses his name for her own extravagant ends, would undoubtedly commit evil deeds even in times of peace. He feigns sincerity, taking her hands and thanking her, but his mind is racing. He had set a trap by asking for a ledger, and her poor acting confirms it. She is guilty. He looks at the woman before him and comes to a firm decision. For the sake of his own peaceful life, Mrs. Tappel must be gone. He knows he cannot allow her to simply gloss over her crimes. While he is pleased she thinks so highly of him, he understands that to expose her, he will need definitive proof. He announces that now that the matter is decided, he will have a meal first. He orders her to bring him dinner and to be prepared to explain anything he doesn't understand in the ledger. A flustered Tappel stammers her understanding and rushes off. Having finished his food, he wipes his mouth, musing that Tappel is probably trying desperately to destroy evidence. A sudden crash draws his attention. He sees the younger maid, Maya, on the floor beside a shattered water jug. She explains that the handle broke because it was old. He laughs it off, remarking that the old furniture in his room is always causing trouble and that everything seems to be worn out. Maya smiles and agrees. Her smile vanishes instantly. She throws herself to the floor, prostrating and apologizing profusely, promising to clean it up right away. Rudolph is stunned by her extreme fear, telling her to stop. He realizes with a sinking feeling that he is an object of terror to his own staff. She scrambles away hurriedly, muttering about finding a rag. In an attempt to bridge the gap between them, Rudolph calls out, asking for her name. He smiles gently, repeating her name to confirm it. I see. Maya. The maid, flustered but relieved, stammers her name one last time. His thoughts drift back to the chaotic scene he had interrupted moments before. He had wanted to ask them something. In his memory, the staff scrambled in a panic as the senior maid frantically ordered them to make sure the ledger was correct before his return from his walk. He recalled his own impatience, demanding to know how long they would make him wait. Back in the present, he stands before his flustered staff in the study. Announcing that he grew tired of waiting, he asked what they were doing. The senior maid steps forward, explaining that she was meticulously checking the ledger to ensure it was flawless for his inspection. Without further ado, he takes the book from her hands. He begins to flip through the pages. At first glance, he internally concedes they did a fine job. The flow of money appeared balanced. The senior maid confidently asserts that she is managing everything properly. But as he continues his inspection, his eyes narrow. He sees something that gives him pause. Unseen by the prince, the senior maid and two other servants huddle just outside the room, listening intently. One of them whispers excitedly for the others to be quiet, anticipating the coming confrontation. Inside, Rudolph prepares to ask his question. He points to a specific entry in the ledger. These expenses for furnishing, he begins, questioning why such a large sum was spent. The senior maid, a bead of sweat on her temple, offers a simple explanation. Your Highness, this is a palace. She spreads her arms wide, encompassing the grand study. She reminds him that the emperor himself bestowed this Scorpio palace upon him to manage and poses a question. What does he believe is the most important part of that duty? With an air of absolute authority, she raises a single finger and declares the answer herself. It's dignity. The prince repeats the word, confused. The senior maid elaborates, explaining that any furniture which undermines the dignity of the imperial family must be replaced. She laments that there are always so many items needing replacement that the budget is never sufficient. Rudolph presses her, clarifying if she means they are constantly replacing old furniture with new pieces. As they speak, the servants outside lean in closer, straining to hear the exchange. His gaze sweeps across the study, taking in the worn-out chairs and aged desk. He then turns back to them, his voice sharp. Then why, he demands, is there so much old furniture here? The question hangs in the air, stunning the staff into silence. His accusation leaves senior maid Tapple stammering, her mind racing. It is true. Not only this room, but the entire palace is filled with worn-out furnishings. From the hallways to the fixtures, there is no trace of dignity to be found. He calmly presents another ledger, asking if she knows what it is. He notes that at first glance, it appears identical to the one she provided. But there's a strange detail. This one still has half of the budget remaining. He holds the book close to her face, his voice low and direct as he declares her ledger a fake. The accusation strikes Tapple with the force of a physical blow, leaving her gasping that it can't be true. Her composure shatters completely. She and her accomplices collapse to the floor in shock as she demands to know who gave him the genuine ledger. In response to her desperate question, Maya steps forward from the doorway, calmly stating that it was her. The prince confirms that Maya found the ledger for him. The steward, aghast, shouts that it's impossible, insisting that the ledger Maya found must be the fake one. She counters his denial by presenting the document, proudly declaring that it bears the official seal of Scorpio Palace. Prince Rudolph adds that the seal is something only he possesses, making it impossible to forge. With the evidence laid bare, the room falls silent. Tapple breaks into a cold sweat, the finality of the situation dawning on her. It's over. His judgment delivered. He makes a subtle gesture with a small, star-shaped object. Instantly, two armed guards burst into the room, ready to act on his command. The guards move swiftly, seizing the senior maid and the steward. As he is being restrained, the steward desperately pleads with the prince to wait. Rudolph, however, simply orders them to be taken away. As they're being dragged out, their alliance crumbles into bitter accusations. The steward calls Tapple a traitor, claiming she was the one who pulled him into the scheme. She retorts furiously, screaming that she was blackmailed by him. The prince watches their downfall, his expression unreadable. He watches as the senior maid, Tapple, erupts in a furious tirade. She screams about her 15 years of loyal service, questioning if he has any compassion for a single mistake, and bellows that he will not die a good death. Her desperate cries echo in the hall, but the prince remains impassive, his eyes opening slowly to meet her gaze. As a guard seizes her, Tapple struggles against the firm grip, groaning and pleading to be released. Her struggle ceases, and she collapses to her knees before him, begging for forgiveness. She confesses that she knows who poisoned him and sent an assassin, pleading for mercy. The steward joins her on the floor, both pleading desperately for mercy as the other staff members look on in stunned silence. He looks down at her, his voice cold as he asks if she truly knows who sent the assassin. His eyes widen with chilling intensity as he declares that it was her, Tapple. He reveals his understanding. The repeated assassination attempts were a ploy to make him suspicious of everyone, forcing him to rely solely on her after he had killed his own brothers to become emperor. He continues, explaining that she deliberately made the poison and assassination attempt survivable. The goal was to isolate him, making him suspicious of all others so that he would depend entirely on her. Overwhelmed by the accusation, Tapel lets out a piercing scream of denial. With the conspirators removed, the prince turns his attention back to the palace's affairs. Addressing the remaining staff, he announces his intention to double-check the ledger, warning that there might still be other fraudulent activities at work. His words send a jolt through the servants. They immediately declare how busy they are and scramble to get back to their duties. Their face is a mixture of panic and feigned diligence. He watches them go, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. He thinks to himself that with this new precedent set, there should be far fewer fraudulent activities in the future. He collapses in on himself, the facade of a stern ruler shattering. The prince admits to himself that the act was terrifying, and he can't maintain it any longer. He turns to Maya, his gratitude genuine as he thanks her for saving him, declaring his tyrannical act over. The maid, taken aback, can only offer a stammered, "You're welcome," her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. He then makes a startling pronouncement, appointing her as his personal maid. Maya is stunned by the sudden promotion, questioning if he is truly certain. He warns her of the difficult path ahead. The other servants, loyal to Tapel, will likely view her as a traitor. Despite the warning, Maya bows deeply, thanking Prince Rudolph and vowing to do her absolute best in her new role. The prince reflects on his past, recalling how he became the cruel emperor. The realization is clear. It was a path forged from isolation, a consequence of having no trustworthy allies. This time, he resolves things will be different. To change history and ensure his own survival, he must gather trustworthy allies. The grand estate stands under a clear sky, leaves drifting on the breeze. Within its gardens, someone tends to the hedges with vigorous snips of their shears. The gardener, a man with his head wrapped in bandages, pauses his work. From a cover of the foliage, he observes Prince Rudolph sitting alone in a nearby gazebo, contemplating his need for more allies. His thoughts coalesce into a startling conclusion. The first step is to acquire a fiancée. Just then, a young noblewoman and her maid enter the garden. As the lady admires the flowers, she spots the prince and calls out his name, Prince Rudolph, catching him completely by surprise. He stared in shock as the young woman formally introduced herself. She was Lisbeth, the eldest daughter of the Farkrantz family, and she expressed that it was an honor beyond measure to be chosen as his fiancée. The two sat opposite one another at a small table, the air still as dark birds flew past the towering columns of the palace. As he observed her shadowed face, a single decisive thought formed in his mind. This girl was an absolute no. The thought spiraled into a dreadful premonition, a vision of destruction flashing through his mind. If he were to marry her, his gaze returned to the present, where Lisbeth held a bouquet of white flowers, remarking on their pleasant fragrance. The horrifying realization struck him with absolute certainty. He would be killed. Before Prince Rudolph sat a young woman of otherworldly beauty. Her hair was a lustrous black, shining like onyx, and her radiant blue eyes glistened like aquamarine. But to him, she was not a welcome sight. He sat across from her at a small table, the air thick with unspoken tension. For Rudolph, an engagement with this woman meant only one thing, an inescapable death. He knew this with certainty because he knew the fate that awaited him and his country 300 years in the future. This knowledge came from his favorite book from that era, an epic poem praising a hero named Wilhelm. In that text, it was written that he would later reign as the Dread Emperor, only to be killed at a young age by her. The epic also mentioned that the hero Wilhelm and the Frostvale maiden, Lisbeth Farkrantz, were deeply in love. Their romance had blossomed when he received a special brooch from her. Following an intense affair, they had vowed eternal love for one another. However, someone came along and tore their relationship apart. The one who interfered, the one who came between the fated lovers, was Rudolph himself. In the end, their love was shattered. Filled with grief and despair, Lisbeth closed her heart once again. The tragic tale culminated in a spray of blood. And so it was written that the cruel Emperor Rudolph perished. With his death, the Baldike Empire was destroyed, and Wilhelm later founded the Sovelier Kingdom. Back in the present, Rudolph grimaced. The details didn't matter. Whatever the case, he knew one thing for sure. Marrying her was a terrible idea. He stared into his teacup, his resolve hardening. He valued his life and had no intention of interfering in the fated romance between others. His inner turmoil was beginning to show. Lisbeth noted his pale complexion and asked if something was the matter. Before he could answer, his maid Maya interjected, suggesting he was simply excited about the dinner and hadn't slept well. Rudolph could only stammer a denial. She continued trying to smooth things over, gently reminding the prince that she understood his nervousness, but that his tea was getting cold. His mind raced. He knew he had to start the conversation himself. To break off a deal initiated by the emperor would be a grave insult. He had to find an amicable way to convince Lisbeth to end the engagement. Steeling himself, he took a slow sip of tea. He finally addressed her directly, stating that he suspected she was rather shocked by the sudden talk of an engagement. Acknowledging that everyone has their own circumstances, he expressed his hope that it hadn't been an inconvenience to her. She thanked him for his considerate words, admitting that she was certainly surprised when she first heard the news. But she then declared the arrangement to be an overwhelming honor. The statement struck Rudolph with the force of a physical blow. His face contorted in panic as he realized she did not see it as an inconvenience at all. Desperate, he pressed on, suggesting that she likely didn't wish for an engagement with someone like him. He reasoned that her participation was probably only due to the Emperor's orders, especially since she already had Wilhelm. Therefore, he concluded, she should have her father decline the engagement. He pleaded with her directly, framing it as a favor. Since the engagement was too much of an honor for him, he implored her to be the one to decline the offer. Her response was simple and devastating. Not at all. Rudolph froze, his carefully constructed plan shattering in an instant, leaving him utterly speechless. He processes her words, a realization dawning on him. She wasn't simply refusing. She was telling him to do better. He understands now that she would need a proper reason, a solid stepping stone, to decline the engagement. A small smile touches his lips as he accepts the challenge. With this new understanding, he decides to take the opportunity to introduce himself properly, initiating his first plan, a thousand lies. He begins a grandiose speech, proclaiming himself the fourth prince, the most gifted genius in the history of the Baldyke Empire. He boasts that no one can match his prowess in academics or swordsmanship, and that he is worshipped and adored by everyone in the Scorpio Palace, regardless of gender. Internally, however, the blatant falsehoods make him want to cry. He believes that such pretentiousness would surely be enough to make any sane person disappointed and call off the engagement. His plan immediately backfires when his maid, Maya, suddenly appears behind him, startling him. She enthusiastically agrees with his claims, declaring to Lisbeth that Prince Rudolph is a truly wonderful person who addressed the corruption in the palace and even saved her when she was accused of being a traitor. Thrown into a panic by her misplaced support, he silently begs Maya to read the room. Realizing that lying isn't working, he decides he must change his approach. Abandoning his first strategy, he announces that it is time for the truth. He has something important to tell her, initiating his second plan, threats. He explains that although he is fourth in line, he is still eligible to succeed the throne, making him a target for assassins. He recounts a recent incident where he was poisoned by a maid, fell into a coma, and was nearly assassinated the moment he woke up. He concludes that if she were to marry him, she would inevitably become involved in such dangerous situations. This, he asserts, should be a good enough reason for her to refuse the engagement. Lisbeth listens, her expression unreadable. She calmly asks if there's a problem with that. She reminds him that her family, the Farkrantz bloodline, has long been called the symbol of the Empire's military, and that she herself practices spearmanship, leaving Rudolph utterly stunned. She calmly explains that showing fear over mere potential assassins would bring shame upon her family. Prince Rudolph sits across from her, speechless. He internally scrambles, realizing his latest tactic has failed. He must devise an even more compelling reason to make her withdraw. As he struggles for a new plan, Lisbeth interrupts his thoughts, asking if he would be willing to share some stories from his childhood. He is caught off guard by the request, questioning her motives. He replies flatly that he has no childhood memories worth recounting, yet his words conjure a memory of a sunlit field. A younger Lisbeth sits before him, thanking him for saving her and offering a small token of her gratitude. The token was a single coin. The memory fades, and back in the present, he reflects that he still possesses it. He decides to keep this memory to himself. It is his alone. His silence prompts Lisbeth to call out to him. Startled from his reverie, he stammers, confirming that she had indeed asked for stories from his youth. A dark thought crosses his mind. He knows many of his childhood tales are infamous among the nobility and suspects she is trying to bait him into recounting them for her own amusement. He imagines her gossiping about his embarrassing past with hero Wilhelm. Deciding to meet her perceived challenge, he resolves that if she wants a show, he will give her one. His foot taps against the floor in a decisive rhythm. He leans forward, inviting her to enjoy the tale he is about to spin. He begins his tale, framing it as the idiotic, ridiculous, and miserable comedy of his life. He explains that, as an illegitimate child and the son of one of the emperor's mistresses, he should not have even been eligible to succeed the throne. Despite this, his mother desperately pleaded with the emperor, successfully convincing him to make Rudolph the fourth prince. He recalls asking his mother a long time ago why he was born. Lisbeth interjects, suggesting his mother must have acted out of consideration for his future. Rudolph's memory provides the cold truth. His mother bluntly stated it was so she could become a part of the imperial family. The revelation leaves his younger self stunned. He explains to a stunned Maya that he was merely insurance for his mother to continue her luxurious life, even if she abandoned him. However, because a new mistress couldn't publicly act like the mother of a prince, the nobles and other royals were not amused by her presence. This resentment manifested as direct cruelty. Other noble women would strike the young prince with their fans. After being struck, he would be left on the floor, isolated in a spotlight of shame while the court whispered and gossiped around him. He realized that no matter what he did, whether he excelled in swordsmanship, studied hard, called out to others, or asked for help, no one would even look at him. Everyone treated him as if he shouldn't exist. This included his biological father, the emperor, and even his own mother, who embraced the emperor while their son was ignored. He explains that this is why he began to do things they couldn't ignore. He would break things on a whim, throw tantrums, and curse people out. He became unreasonably violent over the smallest things, punished servants after giving them impossible tasks, and laughed at their suffering. This was how the tyrant prince was born. And through it all, As the court looked on in horror and disgust, he was happy. He felt a sense of purpose, like a puppet on a stage, because as long as he acted this way, everyone would finally look at him. Finishing his tale, he turns to Lisbeth and Maya, a dark shadow still obscuring his eyes. He asks them what they think, calling his own tragic history pretty funny. Maya is aghast, unable to believe His Highness has been treated so cruelly his entire life. She realizes he was being so honest to make Lisbeth hate him, but she thinks there was no need for such a confession. He notes that Maya only recently became his maid and didn't know the full story. He muses that he is now being pitted by his own servants. He concludes that there is no way the Frostveil Maiden would accept an engagement to such a pitiful man. But Lisbeth does not react with disgust or scorn. Instead, tears stream down her face as she looks at him with profound sorrow. Her unexpected display of empathy leaves him utterly stunned. He is taken aback by her tears, quickly apologizing for rambling on for so long. Flustered, he offers her the use of his handkerchief. As he reaches into his coat, his hand fumbles for a moment. In his haste, something else slips from his pocket. A single gold coin that clinks against the floor, shining brightly. The sound startles his maid, Maya, and Rudolph himself looks down in surprise. Maya points out the gold coin to the prince, while Lisbeth continues to wipe away a tear. Ignoring the coin, he quickly pulls out the handkerchief and then slumps down, flustered by the interruption. He turns his back to her, dismissing the incident by stating it has nothing to do with her. Lisbeth quietly accepts the handkerchief and dabs at her eyes. Seeing the empty teacups, Maya announces that it is about time to conclude their meeting. As they walk away from the table, Maya gestures frantically from behind them, silently urging the prince to take Lisbeth's hand. He glances back, quietly telling his maid to shut up. Walking beside Lisbeth, he is lost in thought, wondering why she was crying. He questions if his story was so funny that it brought her tears. He glances at her, trying to decipher what she could possibly be thinking. They arrive at her carriage. Lisbeth formally thanks him for his time. Still looking troubled, Rudolph suggests that regarding the engagement, it would be best if she sent a letter with her reply after she has had time to think it over. Lisbeth seems surprised by the suggestion of a letter. He confirms his request, urging her to please take her time and consider it carefully, as Maya looks on. He suggests to Lisbeth that it would be easier for her to decline the engagement indirectly, allowing them to avoid any confrontations. Lisbeth, however, looks at him and states that such a measure will not be necessary. With unwavering resolve, she makes her decision clear. She will accept the engagement. Her words strike him like a bolt of lightning. The prince is completely stunned, his eyes wide with disbelief and sweat beading on his face. He struggles to comprehend, stammering out a single question, why? In response, Lisbeth bows her head slightly, humbly asking for his understanding and support despite her inexperience. The prince's composure completely shatters, and he begins to wobble on his feet. His maid, Maya, rushes to his side to support him, congratulating him on his success. He clutches his head in a panic, his mind racing. He wonders how the situation escalated so quickly, convinced that at this rate, he's going to be killed. As he panics, Lisbeth turns to Maya and quietly commends her on a job well done. Maya, placing a finger to her lips in a gesture of secrecy, replies that her lady's wish is her command. Lisbeth then instructs her to continue observing the prince. Prince Rudolph reflects on the 3 days that have passed since his engagement to Lisbeth, the woman known as the Frostveil Maiden, whom he knows is fated to kill him in the future. He resolves that his best option is to keep his distance from her to avoid her wrath, uncertain of her true feelings but determined that he cannot allow himself to die by her hands. His plan, however, was not destined for success. Instead, he finds himself in a bewildering situation. His head, face, and arm are covered in bandages, and Lisbeth herself is carefully wrapping another one of his wounds. He internally screams, questioning how he ended up here. His confusion turns to panic as he fully registers that she is in his room. Having finished with the bandages, Lisbeth holds a spoonful of soup towards him, explaining that it contains medicinal herbs that will hasten his recovery, and telling him to open his mouth. He recoils, flustered, insisting that she doesn't have to feed him and apologizing for having caused her worry. He then attempts to downplay the situation with a nervous smile, claiming to be a clumsy person who simply hurt himself falling down the stairs, assuring her it's nothing serious and happens all the time. Lisbeth listens, her expression unreadable. As she remains silent, the door opens and Maya enters carrying a tea service. The maid cheerfully greets Prince Rudolph, asking about his meeting with the emperor and then questioning if he happened to trip on the stairs of the palace. She places the tea on a table, turning her attention to Lisbeth. Maya remarks that Lisbeth had told her he fell down the stairs, her innocent comment hanging in the air. Her words trigger a realization in Lisbeth, whose expression hardens. She states plainly that Rudolph's story was a lie, and that his injuries were not from an accident, but from an assault. She turns her sharp gaze on Rudolph, grabbing him and demanding answers. Since he only went to see the emperor, she questions why he was so badly hurt. She presses him urgently. Who assaulted him and why? Her pointed question sends Prince Rudolph reeling, not from a physical blow, but from the force of memory. He tries to dismiss his injuries as insignificant, but his mind is already elsewhere, in a grand, echoing hall where he was left doubled over and coughing, surrounded by hostile figures. He had tried to feign a laugh, asking what they were doing, only for his collar to be violently seized, yanking him upward. The man holding him sneered, accusing him of the audacity of walking in front of Sir Robin, the third prince. He declared Rudolph a filthy pig, whose presence defiled his eyes and demanded he be disciplined. Rudolph knew this routine all too well. His brother Robin had been using him as a punching bag since they were children. A swift kick sent him to the floor. His assailant reminded him that while assaulting royalty was a capital crime, no one in this palace would dare to save him. The third prince watched the scene with a twisted, gleeful smile. This was the Scorpio Palace, one of the 13 divisions of the imperial grounds, and it was his brother's domain. Gathering what little defiance he had left, Rudolph spat directly into the face of his tormentor, whose expression instantly shifted from smug superiority to shocked fury. The man's fist crashed into his cheek. As the memory fades, the scene returns to the present. Rudolph turns away from Lisbeth, insisting that what happened isn't her concern. He begs her not to worry, claiming he doesn't want to know anything more about it himself. She looks at him, her gaze steady and perceptive. After a moment of silence, she simply accepts his deflection with a quiet, "Is that so?" His refusal is a shield. He knows he cannot open his heart to her, for he is convinced that one day she will become his enemy, the one who aims for his life. The tense atmosphere is broken by Maya, who steps forward with her hands on her hips. She addresses Lisbeth directly, announcing that she knows what the prince is trying to convey. She strikes a confident pose, saluting smartly. With a proud grin, she declares to Lisbeth that the prince's injuries are honorable wounds, earned while dealing with ruffians who dared to oppose him, and that there is no need to worry. She confidently presented her fabricated tale, but Prince Rudolph, aghast, shouted her name. He demanded to know what she was saying and why she held such a wild impression of him. Maya simply replied that he was the one who caught Mrs. Tapple red-handed, and that it was in his nature not to back down from a fight. She was certain he must have had some kind of plan in mind. The memory of what truly happened, however, was far different. In a grand hall, Prince Robin stood over his brother, delivering a sharp kick. He sneered, asking the fallen Rudolph if he had learned his lesson. As his henchmen noted they had wasted enough time, Robin dismissed his brother's defiance. He scrambled to his feet, a sudden panic on his face. He realized with a jolt that the delay would make him late for his appointment with their father. His worry was cut short by the sudden arrival of the emperor's attendant, the head butler. Prince Robin and his associate froze in surprise as the stern man strode towards them, demanding to know what was happening. The butler then turned his attention to the disheveled Rudolph, asking if he was all right. He then fixed his gaze upon Prince Robin, his voice sharp. The butler declared that by injuring Rudolph, Robin had tarnished the emperor's reputation, an act from which he could not escape. In an attempt to de-escalate the situation, Rudolph quickly interjected, insisting it was merely a common quarrel between brothers. The head butler, however, was not interested in excuses. He told the young prince they would discuss it later and urged him to hurry, reminding him that the emperor was waiting. As they departed, Prince Robin was left behind, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. Walking away, Rudolph reflected on his strategy. He knew it had been worth it, manipulating the situation, even striking his own face to prolong the fight. He had counted on the head butler's intervention if he was delayed for his appointment with the emperor. A grim smile touched his lips. He was different now. He walked through the grand hall, his resolve hardening with every step. With his knowledge of the future and the experiences of his past life, he vowed that he would survive to the very end. His thoughts, however, were not on his brother Robin. He couldn't care less about him. Instead, his focus was entirely on the young woman sitting before him. He needed to figure out what Lisbeth was thinking as they sat opposite one another, an unnerving silence hanging between them. A slow, unsettling smile spread across Lisbeth's face, her eyes glinting with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. The prince flinched, breaking into a cold sweat at her predatory gaze. Leaning in suddenly, Lisbeth closed the distance between them. She asked how his meeting with the emperor had gone, pressing him for details on whether his father had mentioned their engagement. The memory of the meeting surfaced. Lisbeth had arrived late, apologizing to the emperor. She had noted that it seemed he had handled the engagement smoothly on his own. Inside the throne room, Rudolph had found his mother, Beatrice, draped across the emperor's lap. She cooed for his majesty to leave the boy alone and have more fun with her, prompting the emperor to call her a hopeless woman. Standing awkwardly, Rudolph thanked his mother for her help with the engagement, though he silently wondered why she was even there. At his mother's urging, the emperor dismissed him. He told Rudolph he could go, and that from now on, he should know his place. The prince had no choice but to turn and walk away. Back in the present, Rudolph finished his story, telling Lisbeth it was just the usual. A shadow crossed her face as she looked down, her voice quiet as she simply said, "I see." Her disappointment was palpable. He looked at her, genuinely perplexed. He admitted he was surprised to see her in his chambers when he returned. He then asked her directly, "Why did you come?" He stares in disbelief as Lisbeth calmly states her intention to visit him. His heart races as he internally struggles, reminding himself that she is an enemy. Lisbeth, however, questions if it's strange to be concerned for her fiancé's well-being, asking if he gets hurt often. Seeing his injuries, she declares with unwavering resolve that from now on, she will visit his room every day, leaving him utterly shocked. With the matter decided in her mind, Lisbeth repeats her promise to visit him every day. Maya, standing by, expresses her own worry for the prince, but seems to agree with the plan, much to Rudolph's dismay. who thinks daily visits are a bit much. The prince feels himself being cornered, bit by bit, like a butterfly caught in a spider's web, with no way to escape. That night, under a full moon, the scene shifts. The focus moves to the grand and imposing Farkrantz mansion. Within its walls, a voice is heard, thanking Maya. The voice belongs to Lisbeth, who is speaking with her maid, Maya. She explains that thanks to Maya becoming Rudolph's personal maid, she was able to get closer to him. With a confident smile, Lisbeth instructs Maya to continue monitoring the prince, an order the maid accepts with a bow. Maya then notices a dreamy, love-struck expression on Lisbeth's face. Lisbeth is lost in thought, sighing over Prince Rudolph's lovely amber eyes, his gentle voice, and his dignified figure that melts her body and soul. The maid calls out her name in concern. She is startled back to reality. Her maid gently chides her, pointing out that she's letting her feelings show all over her face and advising her to keep it in a little more. She maintained her smug smile as Maya, flustered, questioned her behavior. The maid pointed out that if Lisbeth truly loved the prince, she shouldn't act so cold and unfriendly, as it was surely confusing him. Lisbeth simply noted that she had been wearing a poker face the entire time. The maid recalled those moments vividly. Lisbeth's expressions and words had been ice-cold and deeply off-putting. Lisbeth's composure finally broke. She shouted that she couldn't do anything about it, confessing with a blush that she has had a crush on him forever. She elaborated, her hands covering her blushing face, that every time she tries to talk to him, she gets so nervous her face tenses and her mind goes blank. Maya watched, surprised that someone who seemed so confident could be so shy at heart. Her maid offered some reassurance, thinking Lisbeth did very well to muster her courage. Still, Maya admitted she was worried about what might happen next. Lisbeth's demeanor hardened once more. She declared that she didn't need courage for her daily visits. Turning, she took an ornate glaive from its wall mount, her thoughts turning dark as she vowed she could not forgive what had been done. Wielding the heavy weapon, her eyes burned with fury. She proclaimed that she would protect the prince at his side and turn the fools responsible into rust on her glaive. She couldn't believe he had been treated so terribly, nor could she forgive herself for living in ignorance of his suffering until now. Her maid, alarmed, quickly tried to calm her down, begging her to put the dangerous weapon away. Maya explained that the attack was an exception and that the one who likely hurt Prince Rudolph, the third prince, would not be coming to the Scorpio Palace. She then puffed out her chest with pride, explaining that ever since the incident with the former senior maid, Tappel, no one in the palace dared to be disrespectful to His Highness. Those problematic people, she boasted, had been eliminated thanks to Prince Rudolph's new personal maid, herself. Lisbeth, thoroughly annoyed by her maid's smug expression, grabbed her and squeezed her cheeks tightly. "Are you showing off?" she demanded, as Maya yelped in pain. Her fury now subsided. She clutches a pillow to her chest, a deep blush on her cheeks. With renewed determination, she declares that she wants to become someone special to Prince Rudolph, too. Maya, a sly smile playing on her lips, seizes upon this confession. She points out that this must be the real reason Lisbeth visits the prince every day, not to guard him, but to have a date. Lisbeth is taken aback by the blunt assessment, having thought she was about to die just moments before. Overwhelmed with embarrassment, she collapses to the floor, wailing that she can't possibly do it. Maya, however, remains firm and encouraging, insisting that she can and must speak with His Highness as soon as possible. She then raises a finger, reminding a wide-eyed Lisbeth that a certain important day is fast approaching. The realization dawns on Lisbeth as she stands beside Maya in the corridor. She murmurs that the event is only a week away. It will be her birthday party. The thought of dancing with Prince Rudolph fills her with such a mix of happiness and nervousness that she feels she might faint. Watching her mistress's internal struggle, Maya listens as Lisbeth resolves to prepare herself for the occasion. Suddenly, Maya has her master pinned to the floor in a painful-looking hold. She cheerfully announces that this is payback for earlier, ignoring Lisbeth's pained protests about her status. That night, the moon hangs high above the palace. Inside, Prince Rudolph lies awake in his bed, his hands clasped behind his head. He contemplates Lisbeth's identity, wondering if she could truly be the same Frostvale maiden from the epic of the hero Wilhelm. He senses something is off. While she is certainly icy, as the legends say, her visits did not feel like they were merely out of obligation. He lay in bed, his mind racing through the discrepancies of this new timeline. The downfall of Tappel and his own search for a fiancée were events that never happened in the history he knew. He couldn't shake the feeling that his own actions were the cause of this divergence from the original path. This train of thought led him to a startling realization. Even if he actively tried to avoid Lisbeth, she would pursue him relentlessly on her own. He was, it seemed, heading towards an inescapable future where he marries her. A wild guess began to form in his mind, a chilling hypothesis based on this sense of inevitability. If marrying Lisbeth was truly an unavoidable event, then perhaps something else was as well. The thought struck him with the force of a lightning bolt. If their marriage was fate, was his own death also an unavoidable event? As the prince grappled with this grim possibility, the night deepened. Elsewhere, under the light of a full moon, a grand mansion stood silent, its long corridors steeped in shadow. In one of its rooms, a breeze rustled the curtains. A man's voice broke the silence, noting that her birthday would be arriving soon. The words were meant for Lisbeth. The voice continued, promising that he would come to pick her up. The speaker, the second son of the Sauvelier family, held a glass of wine, his expression one of intense resolve. He made a quiet vow to make Lisbeth his, without fail. Prince Rudolf sits in silence opposite Lisbeth Farkrantz. The quiet is shattered when his maid, Maya, rushes to his side, startling him. She insists he pay attention, explaining that Lisbeth has gone to great lengths to tell him something important about his upcoming birthday party. He processes the information as Maya clarifies that since the party is hosted by his fiancée, he won't be going alone. Appearing with a woman outside his family would be rude. Rudolf resigns himself to the fact, though he seems disappointed that Maya cannot accompany him. Leaning in, he whispers a secret request, asking her to prepare something for him beforehand. Her face lights up with comical determination. Maya enthusiastically accepts the task, vowing to bring him whatever he desires and declaring her intent to charm Lisbeth at the party. A week passes, and the scene shifts to the grand estate where the celebration will be held. Upon his arrival, Rudolf is formally welcomed by the heads of the Farkrantz family, Marquis Douglas and Mrs. Teresa. The prince is immediately intimidated by the Marquis's severe expression, though he offers his thanks for the invitation. As a maid announces his presence to Lisbeth, Rudolf steels his nerves, preparing himself for the encounter. At that moment, Lisbeth appears. She is dressed in a stunning, elegant gown, her hair intricately styled, and a faint blush colors her cheeks as she looks on with a shy, expectant expression. He is visibly taken aback by her appearance. Lisbeth performs a graceful curtsy, thanking him for attending. Flustered, Rudolf stammers that the pleasure is all his. From a short distance, Mrs. Farkrantz observes the two with a knowing smile. She encourages them to make themselves comfortable together, noting that there is still plenty of time before the party officially begins, and then departs, leaving them alone. The moment they are by themselves in the vast room, Rudolf's mind goes completely blank, a wave of panic washing over him as he forgets every topic of conversation he had prepared. His internal panic manifests as he and Lisbeth both try to speak at once, creating an awkward silence. She graciously gestures for him to speak first. He struggles for a moment before managing to stammer out a compliment, telling Lisbeth she looks very beautiful. Her eyes widen slightly at his words. A bright, genuine smile spreads across her face as she tells him she is happy to hear that. Overcome with shyness, she covers her blushing face and returns the compliment, saying he also looks very elegant. As they share this moment, unseen party guests gossip nearby, questioning if this shy girl could really be the legendary Frostveil maiden Lisbeth from the epic, who was supposedly in love with Wilhelm. Their chatter goes unnoticed as Rudolf suddenly remembers his purpose. He tells Lisbeth he has something to give her. Before he could present his gift, the doors swung open, and another guest arrived. The second son of the Sauvelier family strode in with a confident smile, greeting Lisbeth by name. He continued, expressing his worry over not having heard from her and his gladness to see she was well. He declared her more beautiful than ever, then made a startling claim that he was Wilhelm, the hero from the epic, and that he and Lisbeth were fated to be together. In response to this declaration, Rudolf moved between them, his hand firmly on the other man's shoulder. He coolly informed the guest that Lisbeth already had company and asked if he was incapable of reading the situation. The prince couldn't hide his confusion. He had thought Lisbeth and Wilhelm were lovers. His intervention was met with a sudden, chilling change in Lisbeth. Her face contorted with fury as she seized the Sauvelier son's wrist, her voice low and menacing as she ordered him not to touch the prince. She then shoved him back with surprising force, her expression a mixture of disgust and anger. The idea that they were fated to be together was something she found laughable. With venom in her voice, she accused him of being the one who had defiled her most precious memories. With her arms crossed defiantly, she informed the stunned man that she was, in fact, engaged to Prince Rudolf. The Sauvelier son was left reeling, trying to understand the situation. Her accusation about defiled memories echoed in his mind. This was not a lover spat. He realized with a shock that she genuinely seemed to hate him. The memory she spoke of was from their childhood, a scene also recorded in the epic. A young Prince Rudolf had been tormenting her, pulling her hair, when the Sauvelier's son stepped in, shouting for him to stop. After a brief, thankful exchange, the boy had to leave, but first pressed a small, round object in her hand, urging her to take it. He remembered it clearly. He had given her a brooch and promised they would meet again. That moment had been dramatized by historians, becoming one of the most popular romantic stories in the epic. Confidently, he asked if she recalled the question from his letter, what he had given her on the day they first met. In response, she held up the keepsake from that day. It was not the ornate brooch of legend. With cold certainty, she declared that what he had given her was merely a button. He stammered, finding it impossible to believe. Lisbeth, however, was resolute. She accused him of deceiving her and stated she had no interest in his excuses. She commanded him never to let her see him again. Utterly defeated, the Sauvelier son could only agree to leave for the day, as Prince Rudolf observed the entire confrontation in silence. He stood in stunned silence, unable to reconcile the events with the history he had learned. He couldn't understand how things had become so different. A chilling thought crossed his mind. Had his actions somehow rewritten the past? The pieces began to click into place. He realized the story of the brooch must have been a fabrication, an exaggeration by historians to make the tale more sensational. They had even claimed Wilhelm treated Lisbeth roughly. He pictured a farcical version of the story, with a love-struck Wilhelm pursuing a completely uninterested Lisbeth. His realization sent a jolt of terror through him. If the epic was a lie, then in the true history, he was the one who stole Lisbeth from Wilhelm. He envisioned Wilhelm, filled with hatred for him, seeking revenge. The fear of assassination gripped him, a threat that would loom even if he never became emperor. The situation was far too dangerous. As his mind raced with fear, Lisbeth turned to face him, her earlier fury replaced by a quiet sorrow, tears welling in her eyes. She apologized for the trouble she had caused and softly suggested they end the engagement. Rudolph could only stare, stunned into silence, as she repeated her apology. He looked at her tear-streaked face and understood that her suggestion was not a simple matter. Judging by her expression, there was more to the story. "Please tell me everything," he implored, his own fears forgotten. He remembered her mentioning a past lover chasing her and insisted he wanted to know more. He pressed on, asking what had happened between her and that man, but instantly regretted the question. Her expression told him everything he needed to know. It was a mask of anxiety, agitation, and fear. He could see the conflict within her. She wanted to tell her story, but was terrified he would be disappointed. It was an expression of pure despair. That look of despair struck him deeply. A single, powerful thought surfaced in his mind. He did not want Lisbeth to ever make that face again. Leaning closer, he softly told her that she hadn't really changed at all. He knelt before her, taking her hands gently in his. He then made a request of his own, asking if she would be willing to listen to his story first. A story about his own precious memories, which he felt had also been defiled by that man. Lisbeth Farkrantz begins to share her story with Prince Rudolph. It happened 9 years ago, when she was only 5 years old. Her father had taken her to the imperial palace, and it was there that her memories were forever tainted by Wilhelm. The memory shifts to that day. A young, awestruck Lisbeth holds her father's hand, marveling at the grand palace. She runs ahead through a garden, excitedly pointing out the beautiful flowers to her father, who cautions her not to run so fast lest she fall. Despite his warning, she trips and tumbles onto the stone path. Her father cries out her name in alarm, but she quickly pushes herself up, insisting with a smile that she is fine and it's no big deal. He praises her for being such a good girl. Beaming with pride, she shows him an amulet around her neck, a gift from him. She explains that it's a Farkrantz family tradition, an amulet the first lord of their house, carried through all his wars, said to grant the wishes of its bearer. Her father lovingly tells her to take good care of it. Inside the palace, her father settles her onto a large, ornate chair with some books. He informs her that he must go discuss an important matter and asks her to wait there for him. He then joins a group of other noblemen, leaving her alone. She sits for a moment, her cheeks puffed out in a clear expression of boredom and impatience. Unable to wait any longer, she slips off the chair and begins to wander the vast corridors of the palace, hoping to find the garden she had seen outside. Her wandering leads her to a large, empty hall. Realizing she is completely lost, she calls out into the silence, wondering where she is. Her call is answered by the palace's head butler, who appears with a young Prince Robin and his attendant. The butler sternly notes that he has never seen her before and questions if she knows she is in the imperial palace. The attendant adds a chilling threat. All intruders are put to death. Prince Robin silences his attendant, noting that her clothes suggest she is a guest. His tone quickly turns cruel, however, as he remarks that he was looking for someone to test his new swordsmanship on. He orders both men to capture her. When the attendant hesitates, Robin threatens to use him as the target instead, sending a wave of terror through the young Lisbeth as the men close in. She ran in a panic, her mind racing with confusion. Why was she being chased? Behind her, the voices of her pursuers echoed, demanding she be caught. Her desperate flight continued down the opulent palace corridor as she cried out for help. Suddenly, a hand shot out from an alcove, grabbing her wrist and pulling her from the main hall with a startled gasp. Just as she vanished, her pursuers thundered past, one of them reminding His Highness that he would lose his carriage for a week if they failed. Hidden from view, she found herself with a young, white-haired boy. He quietly asked if those men were after her, and she could only stare, wondering who he was. He offered a reassuring smile, promising her that she would be safe and that no one would find her in this hiding spot. After a moment, he cautiously peeked out, confirming that the corridor was now empty. Turning back to her, he asked where she had been trying to go. She looked up, startled by the question, and began to stammer an uncertain reply. He led her out of the palace and into a vast, sun-drenched garden. She gasped in awe at the beautiful flowers. When she asked if she could pick some, he readily agreed, and the two sat together amongst the blossoms. In the quiet tranquility of the garden, they sat across from one another, the girl carefully weaving the flowers she had gathered into a delicate crown. With a cheerful smile, she gently placed the finished flower crown upon his head. He beamed, his own smile mirroring hers. The peaceful moment shattered. His eyes widened in sudden alarm as he spotted two figures approaching in the distance, the head butler and another man. Without a word, he shoved her backward into a thick hedge, startling her. He pressed a finger to his lips, urgently whispering for her to be quiet and stay hidden as he shielded her from view. He stands his ground as his brother, Prince Robin, approaches with his attendants. Robin, perched atop one of his men, sneers, questioning if someone like Rudolph is even allowed in this garden before dismissing the thought, declaring himself a nice guy. Lisbeth remains hidden in the bushes, her eyes wide with fear. His brother then addresses him with a derogatory name, demanding to know if he has seen a girl around their age. Unseen by Robin, Lisbeth peeks out from behind Rudolph's back. He calmly denies having seen anyone. Robin appears to accept the answer, dismissing the matter, but Rudolph's face remains shadowed and tense. The pretense of acceptance shatters as Robin viciously kicks him in the face, sending him stumbling back. He snarls that he knew Rudolph was lying, calling him a piece of trash who would lie so easily. As he falls to the ground, clutching his bruised cheek, Robin commands his attendants to hold him down. The head butler hesitates for a moment before being urged to hurry. They seize him, and Robin leans in close, demanding he spit out the girl's location with the promise that the violence will stop if he complies. From her hiding spot, tears stream down Lisbeth's face as she watches, silently questioning why Rudolph is being subjected to this. The interrogation is cut short by the tolling of the noon bell. The head butler informs His Highness that it is time for lunch. With a frustrated grunt, Robin abandons his efforts and departs with his men. Once they are gone, he pushes himself up from the dirt, his face bruised. He approaches Lisbeth's hiding place, apologizing for pushing her down earlier and asking if she is hurt. He reassures her that he is fine, as he is used to such treatment. His casual acceptance of the abuse causes her to burst into tears. Startled, he asks why she is crying, and she sobs that anyone would cry upon hearing someone say they are used to being hit. He looks at her, a profound realization dawning on him. No one has ever cried for him before. Composing herself, Lisbeth offers him a gleaming gold coin as a token of gratitude for saving her, explaining that her father told her it would make her wishes come true. He looked at the coin, and a memory surfaced. Not his own, but another's from 9 years past. A young boy with reddish-brown hair thanked a dark-haired girl, telling her that because she paid attention to him, one of his wishes had already come true. The girl, intrigued, asked what kind of wish it was. The memory continued. A servant found them in the garden, and another boy with white hair ran off before his name could be learned. In the present, the man recalling this moment was struck with a shocking realization. It couldn't be true. His thoughts raced. The girl who gave him that gold coin 9 years ago in the Imperial Palace. There was no way she was Lisbeth. He remembered being harshly scolded by his father after that day. Now, 10 years later, he had received a similar coin from that same boy. He connected this to the prophecy. Lisbeth would become the Frostvale maiden and kill him. The scene shifted back to the present, where Lisbeth held up a gold coin on a chain. She asked Prince Rudolph if he had one just like it. His eyes widened in shock as he looked from the coin to her warm, smiling face, utterly speechless. Tears streamed down his face as he began to explain. Through times of struggle, hardship, and pain, in moments where he felt he was about to break, the memory of her sustained him. He fell to his knees and pulled her into a desperate embrace, confessing that it was because of her coin and his memories of her that he was able to remain himself through it all. He held her tightly, thanking her for saving him and for paying attention to him. Lisbeth cried as well, embracing him back and telling him she felt the same way, that she had always wanted to express her gratitude to him. The emotional intensity was broken as he suddenly pulled back, flustered. Stammering her name, he abruptly announced it was time to go, remembering his birthday party. As he opened the door, however, he stopped, his eyes wide with alarm. He turned back to her, demanding to know about a man named Wilhelm and what her relationship was to him. Lisbeth's expression became shadowed as she replied that Wilhelm was proof of her own stupidity. Rudolph could only stare, confused, as she walked away down the long hall. From a hidden spot, the Sauvelier's son watched, his fist clenching. He couldn't be wrong about his conclusions. He realized that if things continued on their current path, Lisbeth would marry Rudolph. He resolved then and there that it would not be allowed to happen. He stood in stunned silence, a shocking realization dawning upon him. Could there be another person who knows the history of the future? His mind reeled with the implications, a grim vision solidifying in his thoughts. Lisbeth, standing victorious over the fallen form of Prince Rudolph. This, he understood with chilling certainty, was the history that was destined to unfold. After all, Rudolph would die at her hands. There was simply no future for him. Lisbeth Farkrantz stands before Prince Rudolph, ready to confess. She begins her story, explaining that her foolish self met the man she knew as Wilhelm at a party about a year ago. In the memory, a younger Lisbeth stands alone in a grand hall, besieged by nobles pleading for her attention. The nobles aggressively push their sons on her, begging for a dance or a song. Overwhelmed and disgusted, she shoves them away, shouting for them to get out of her face. She recalls her desperation at the time. As she was not yet an adult, she couldn't hire investigators or spies to help her, leaving her feeling utterly trapped and at the end of her rope. Before she knew it, 8 long years had passed without her being able to find the person from her memories. But that was when, finally, she found him. The memory shifts to a young man with reddish-brown hair approaching her, holding a single white rose. With a charming smile, he declares that they have met at last, calling her his destined soulmate. He is met with a cold stare. Lisbeth asks who he is, stating bluntly that she has no interest in shallow men who reek of dishonesty. He simply laughs, remarking on how harsh she is. His smile remains as he asks if she could have possibly forgotten him. He reminds her of a day 8 years prior, in the imperial garden where white jasmine bloomed so beautifully, and how he played with her for a blissful moment. The memory strikes Lisbeth, leaving her stunned. He then explains his current appearance. He is the only one in his family with a different hair color, which caused many rumors to spread over the years. To quiet them, he dyed his hair red. When Lisbeth asks what his original color was, he confirms it's the same as when they first met. The memory replays his words. At last we met. My destined soulmate. A young attendant gasps in the background. Back in the present, Lisbeth admits to Rudolph that her longing to meet him was so powerful it clouded her judgment, leading her to trust him blindly. She concludes her initial account by telling Rudolph that since that day, she has been meeting with Wilhelm regularly, although it is only for tea about once a month. Her story about Wilhelm provoked a strong, visceral annoyance in Prince Rudolph, though he could not immediately understand the reason for his irritation. He saw her distress, and she, misinterpreting his expression, began to panic. Believing he must be disappointed in her for trusting a liar, she quickly tried to reassure him that she wasn't upset with him. He quickly told her it was fine and urged her to continue, though internally he seethed, wishing he could tear his past self to pieces. As Lisbeth composed herself with an apology, the prince's mind raced. It made no sense. How could this Wilhelm be telling her the story of how they met? He noted that while the eye color was the same, the hair color, texture, gaze, and even the shape of the mouth were completely different. She continued, explaining that she had foolishly trusted the man at first. However, the more they spoke, the more a sense of wrongness grew within her. This led her to ask him about the item she had given him the first time they met. As he listened, Rudolph wondered if the man still possessed it, or if he hadn't held it dear enough to keep. In her memory of that moment, her question about Wilhelm was met with a heavy silence, his expression unreadable. He finally broke the silence, correcting her by saying it was the other way around. He claimed that her memories were too precious to him, and so he had kept them well protected to prevent any damage. His strange, evasive answer left her momentarily stunned, able only to murmur a quiet, uncertain, "Is that so?" This was the moment Lisbeth's attendant recalled her mistress describing. It was then that Lisbeth's doubts truly began to deepen. She had tried asking him about it several more times, but he always dodged the question. The attendant then asked Lisbeth directly if she truly believed this Wilhelm was the boy from her memories. She noted that while years had passed, he seemed very different from the stories. Lisbeth had to concede that, honestly, she could no longer be sure. Seizing the opportunity, the attendant proposed a plan. If this Wilhelm was an imposter, then the real boy from her memories must still be out there. She suggested infiltrating the palace where Lisbeth met him to search for a lead. Lisbeth considered the idea, acknowledging that her attendant had a point. She eagerly accepted the mission, declaring that she, Maya, would successfully infiltrate the palace. Lisbeth calmly asked if she could truly do it, but Prince Rudolph lunged forward in alarm, shouting for them to wait. His shock was palpable as he pointed, exclaiming her name, Maya, and questioning if she was Lisbeth's agent. Lisbeth, covering her mouth, let out a small sound of surprise at his outburst. She explained that it was impossible for there to be a spy, as Maya had been her maid and bodyguard since she was little. Any rat would have been sensed immediately. Rudolph conceded that Maya seemed more capable than he had expected, though a hint of doubt remained. He then posed the crucial question. If Maya was the only one who knew of their shared past, how did Wilhelm learn about it? Lisbeth clarified that she hadn't told anyone. She explained that after Maya infiltrated the palace, she saw Lisbeth staring fondly at a gold coin, which led her to suspect Prince Rudolph might be the boy from her memories. This realization prompted her to accept the engagement immediately. Rudolph noted it was a fast decision, and Lisbeth confirmed he had seen the gold coin she tried to hide. She continued her story, recounting how she had Maya deliver a letter to the man, known as Wilhelm, to sever their ties. Upon receiving it, the Sauvelier son stood in a doorway, demanding to know the meaning of such a sudden decision, unable to believe it. As he stood there, Maya presented him with a single, pointed question. What was the item that Lisbeth had given to him on that day long ago? His face darkened as he answered, stating that what Lisbeth gave him that day was a brooch. With that incorrect answer, Maya's expression hardened. She now understood the truth. With that final piece of evidence, the matter was settled. Back in the present, Lisbeth finished her explanation to Prince Rudolph, stating that it was confirmed. The man had been deceiving her. He processed this, his hand to his chin in thought. He wondered why the imposter knew some details, but not everything. A new theory formed in his mind. Perhaps the man had also been at the palace that day and had seen them playing in the garden. He continued to reason that the man might have seen Lisbeth give him something, but not clearly enough to identify the object. This would explain why he always dodged the question until, in a moment of desperation, he answered a brooch. While something still bothered him, this explanation made sense for now. He suspected the true reason for the deception lay elsewhere. He considered the immense power of the Farkrantz family, a symbol of military might. For any aristocrat or royal seeking to dominate the empire, their strength was a coveted prize. Marrying Lisbeth would secure that support, just as the hero Wilhelm had once used their backing to destroy the empire and forge a new kingdom after the death of the dread emperor, Rudolf. This historical precedent led him to a dark suspicion. Could Wilhelm's scheme also involve having Lisbeth assassinate him? He recalled Lisbeth's account of her own distress. She had laughed bitterly, calling herself a foolish woman for being so disappointed. But Maya had fiercely defended her, insisting she was not at fault. The blame, Maya declared, lay with the man who had used and trampled on their shared memories. Bringing his thoughts back to the present moment, he turned to Lisbeth, who was still sniffling. He gently told her to forget about that man, reminding her that today was her birthday party. They walked together down a long, ornate hallway. As they entered the main hall, a wave of gasps and murmurs swept through the assembled guests, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. The crowd's whispers followed them as they walked. Guests noted Lisbeth's beauty, but were stunned to see her accompanied by the tyrant prince. They questioned why she would be with someone like him. Unfazed, Lisbeth turned to him, explaining that she needed to greet the guests and would see him later. He acknowledged her with a simple yes. Nearby, other ladies gossiped, wondering why Lisbeth's engagement hadn't been announced yet. One of them, with a knowing smile, remarked that it was the emperor's decision. After she departed, he decided it was best not to stir any rumors, content to simply be a fly on the wall for the remainder of the event. Meanwhile, Lisbeth dutifully made her rounds, politely greeting the various nobles and guests who had come to celebrate her birthday. The social obligations were clearly taking their toll, her expression growing weary. Nearby, two noblemen gossiped animatedly, their gestures and expressions suggesting they were discussing her and the unfolding situation with great interest. She sits beside Prince Rudolph as the party continues in full swing. Musicians fill the hall with a lively tune while servants attend to the guests. The music inspires several couples to take to the floor, gliding gracefully in time with the melody. As he watches them, Rudolph reflects that he has always been an observer at these events. For the first time, he finds himself actually paying attention to the dance itself. His thoughts are interrupted when Lisbeth turns to him, a hopeful blush on her cheeks, and asks if he will invite her to dance. A wave of panic washes over Rudolph. The only dances he knows are from ancient village festivals, completely useless now. He realizes he must find an excuse to refuse. She senses his hesitation, asking what he's worried about. Flustered, Rudolph admits that he has never actually danced before. Her expression softens. She tells him not to worry and offers to be his first partner. Taking his hands, she leads him onto the floor, instructing him to straighten his back, listen to the rhythm, and simply follow her lead. He tries to follow, but their steps are clumsy. Nearby guests mock them, calling it a child's dance. A noblewoman then deliberately bumps into Rudolph, sending him stumbling. She offers a false apology before walking away with a smirk. The whispers and the collision trigger a storm of self-loathing in his mind. He imagines monstrous faces laughing at him, calling him a filthy pig unworthy of being with Lady Lisbeth. His face drains of color, but Lisbeth, unaware, simply smiles and suggests they try again. Her encouragement does little to quiet his inner turmoil. In his mind, a single spotlight illuminates their silhouette as he questions if he can truly be with her like this. His fears are not imagined. Across the hall, guests whisper about his lack of experience and how he is off the beat. Even Marquis Farkrantz observes them, noting the prince's ineptitude. Rudolph feels their stares, cementing his belief that he is a palace outcast, while she is a high-class flower. A gap he feels can never be bridged. He is paralyzed by a dark thought, a vision of his foretold future as a tyrant. He wonders, his mind reeling, if he should simply give in and become the cruel emperor history expects him to be. Her voice cuts through his grim reverie. Lisbeth smiles warmly, gently reminding him that when one is dancing, they are supposed to look at their partner's face. Her simple words startle him back to the present. He stammers an apology, his composure shaken, but agrees they should try again. Her hand remains steady in his, a silent gesture of encouragement. Taking her hand with a newfound determination, he tells her that she has always been looking only at him, and that he, in turn, should not look away from her. With this focus, their movements begin to synchronize, catching the attention of the onlookers. The guests murmur in surprise that they're actually dancing properly. Marquis Farkrantz observes intently, noting that it is extremely difficult for a beginner to lead and synchronize their breathing with their partner. Even the other noblewomen concede that the prince now looks quite impressive. The initial awkwardness vanishes, replaced by a shared, exhilarating momentum as they glide across the dance floor. Lost in the rhythm, their faces are alight with pure, unadulterated joy. As the final note of the music sounds, they strike a pose in the center of the ballroom, met with a wave of applause from the surrounding guests. The prince collapses into a nearby chair, panting with exhaustion, but relieved that he managed to finish without embarrassing Lisbeth. She approaches, praising his wonderful performance, and, seeing how tired he is, offers to fetch him a drink. He accepts her kindness as his mind retraces the steps. A realization dawns on him. While the instruments and tempo were different, the melody and rhythm were quite similar to a village festival dance from his memories, a recollection that had unknowingly guided him. He reflects on the memory of the lively village dance, realizing that it was this fleeting image that allowed him to successfully navigate the formal steps of the royal ball. Sinking into a nearby chair, he lets out a long sigh of relief, the tension from the performance finally leaving his body. His relief quickly hardens into resolve. He can do this. Even if history dictates that he will die as the dread emperor, he vows to himself that he will rewrite that future. He clenches his fist, a small, determined smile on his face. He will forge a new path, a small, happy history where he can stay with Lisbeth forever. As this thought solidifies, a man's voice interrupts, asking for a moment of his time. Rudolph looks up, startled, from his seat next to Lisbeth. He is stunned to recognize the imposing figure as Marquis Douglas Farkrantz, Lisbeth's father. The Marquis apologizes for not greeting him properly earlier, but Rudolph, flustered, insists that he is the one who should apologize. Meanwhile, Lisbeth stands a short distance away, her face flushed. She recalls the intense look on Prince Rudolph's face mid-dance, thinking she could have gotten lost in his amber eyes. Shaking herself from her reverie, she approaches the prince with a bright smile, offering him a glass of fruit water. She tells him he must be tired and, when he doesn't seem to notice, calls out again to get his attention. Before Rudolph can respond to her, the Marquis speaks again, his tone serious. He states that he wishes to request one match from Prince Rudolph. The word stuns both Lisbeth and the prince, who stares in disbelief, wondering what plot the Marquis could be hatching. In a grand courtyard, a sparring match with Marquis Douglas is arranged, framed as a form of training. The Marquis offers Prince Rudolph a wooden sword. Taking it, Rudolph is surprised by its weight, a fact he's never considered before. The Marquis notices his hesitation and asks if something is amiss. He observes the weapon more closely, remarking that the wooden sword looks as though it has been used for years. The Marquis's face darkens, his expression unreadable in the shadows. The Marquis confirms this, stating it has been part of his daily routine since childhood, swinging it 1,000 times a day. He strikes a powerful pose, an intimidating aura flaring around him. The sheer killing intent radiating from the Marquis strikes Rudolph with the force of a physical blow, his mind screaming with the premonition of death. He feels the crushing pressure and understands the Marquis's true feelings. He does not approve of the engagement. The Marquis internally seethes, refusing to let a tyrant prince marry his daughter, Liz, and considering how to make any harm that befalls the prince look like an accident during training. As the tension escalates, Lisbeth rushes between them, pleading with Prince Rudolph not to fight. She warns him that her father is the Empire's strongest warrior, the Obsidian War Demon, and that those who fight him are turned into mangled corpses. Rudolph stares, shocked by the revelation. He watches her, a bead of sweat on his temple. He admits to himself that he is honestly scared, but he knows he cannot run from this challenge. His resolve hardens, but Lisbeth remains defiant, refusing her father's order to step back. Her mother calls her name, but Lisbeth stands firm, shielding the prince. Before the Marquis can act, Rudolph's voice cuts through the tension. He holds up a single finger and proposes a condition for the duel. If he can land just one strike on the Marquis's body with a wooden sword, he will be declared the winner. He accepts the terms, though he internally scoffs at the Marquis's confidence, realizing the man believes he can't even be grazed. With no way out, he readies himself. Mrs. Farkrantz shouts for the match to begin, and the Marquis lunges forward instantly. He lunged forward, wooden sword held high. Despite his charge, a critical thought surfaced. He had never been formally taught swordsmanship. His mind raced, recalling how he had learned only through imitation, secretly observing the knights, training, and practicing what he saw. With a desperate cry, he pressed his attack against the unimpressed Marquis. The attack was futile. In a blur of motion, the Marquis sidestepped and delivered a powerful counterstrike, sending Rudolph's sword flying from his grasp. From his sidelines, Lisbeth cried out in shock. He landed hard on the ground, stunned and disarmed. Marquis Douglas stood over him, casually resting the wooden blade on his shoulder, and coldly commanded, "Next." He scrambled back to his feet, charging forward with another desperate yell. The Marquis met the wild swing with ease, and a sharp crack echoed as Rudolph was struck down once more. "Next," the Marquis repeated. The brutal exchange continued. Each time Rudolph rose, he was met with another blow, another sharp impact, and the same relentless command. "Next." Watching from the sidelines, Lisbeth's composure finally shattered. With tears in her eyes, she pleaded, "Enough. Please stop." Her plea was ignored. The Marquis swung his weapon with immense force, the blow sending the prince flying backward through the air. The prince crashed to the dirt, sprawled and unmoving. The single thought running through his mind was one of disbelief. Impossible. The Marquis looked down at the battered young man, his face a mask of pure contempt. "Is that all you've got, Prince Rudolph?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. He lay on the ground, defeated, as Marquis Douglas loomed over him. The Marquis's voice was cold as he stated that with such a low level of strength, the prince would be unable to protect anything important to him. In response to her father's cruelty, Lisbeth rushed forward, her hand outstretched. She pleaded with her father to stop, while simultaneously begging His Highness not to engage any further. He ignored her cries, his face hidden in shadow as he used the wooden sword as a crutch to slowly rise. A memory surfaced, the moment he had decided to fight back, to resist the fate that had been laid out for him. He recalled the original flow of history, a timeline where he was destined to become a cruel emperor and die at the age of 25. But his engagement to Lisbeth had altered that path. The future was no longer certain. This change meant his life could be taken at any moment. A chilling realization followed. Because she was now by his side, Lisbeth was also in danger. This understanding brought clarity. He looked up at the Marquis, who watched him with a thoughtful expression, and asked if that was the reason for this brutal test. He continued, panting for breath, accusing the Marquis of testing him. He understood now that this was a trial to see if he possessed both the strength and the resolve necessary to protect Lisbeth. His eyes, though filled with tears of pain and exhaustion, burned with unwavering determination. He declared that he could still go on. With a defiant roar, he launched himself into the air, bringing the wooden sword down in a desperate, overhead strike. The Marquis observed the attack with disdain, thinking to himself that the reckless thrust from an exhausted body was so predictable he could evade it with his eyes closed. But as the blade descended, his calm shattered. The Marquis's eyes widened in shock as he was forced to catch the wooden sword with his bare hand. He felt an immense pressure, a raw, killing intent that he could not ignore. Despite this surprising show of force, he still found it lacking. He stares in disbelief as the wooden sword in his hand shatters upon impact. The force of Prince Rudolph's desperate strike splinters the practice weapon, sending fragments flying. The impact reverberates back, snapping the prince's own sword. Before Rudolph can recover, the Marquis drives the hilt of his broken weapon into the boy's midsection, knocking the wind out of him. The prince collapses to the ground, his body trembling from the blow. Lisbeth and her mother, Teresa, watch from the sidelines, their faces etched with shock and horror at the duel's violent conclusion. Lisbeth cries out in alarm, her voice echoing across the training grounds, "Your Highness!" Sometime later, the confrontation has ended. The grand hallway of the palace is silent and empty, dust motes dancing in the light. Within his chambers, Prince Rudolph has been put to bed, the opulent room still and quiet around him. Elsewhere, Lisbeth confronts her father, her expression a mask of pure fury. Trembling with rage, she demands to know if there was truly a need to take things so far. Her father explains calmly that after sparring with him, he realized he had no choice. Considering the prince's high position, he had to test whether Rudolph was truly worthy of being entrusted with his beloved daughter. She counters that the prince's lack of skill is not due to laziness, but because no one has ever paid him any attention. The Marquis concedes her point, acknowledging that his Highness's swordsmanship and physical skills are those of a complete beginner. He then directs her to look at something. He holds up the shattered remains of Rudolph's practice sword. He explains that the wooden sword was old and its durability was at its limit. The fact that it broke was no accident, he realizes with a start. His Highness aimed for it. He understood now. Though it had appeared as if the prince was striking at random, he had actually been guided to receive every attack at the exact same spot. He explained to a wide-eyed Lisbeth that it was likely a gamble to see if the sword would actually break. But, he added, that wasn't the true point. As Lisbeth questioned him, he elaborated on what the prince had truly shown. The ability to judge the old wooden sword's condition and find an opening, even in the face of a hopeless difference in skill. A glint of excitement appeared in his eyes as he held the broken hilt. He declared that his Highness is a diamond in the rough who will shine with the right polishing, admitting it had been a long time since he'd felt the thrill of battle. Meanwhile, the prince himself was fast asleep, murmuring softly in his bed. He stirred, slowly opening his eyes to find Lisbeth's face unexpectedly close. He groggily questioned her presence, and she formally addressed him as Your Highness. As he attempted to sit up, a sharp pain shot through his body, making him cry out. Lisbeth immediately cautioned him not to move yet. She gently guided him back down, his head coming to rest on her lap. The realization struck him with a jolt. A lap pillow. He panicked internally, flustered by her closeness, and wondering if this was normal for aristocrats, especially since they had only just become engaged. Lisbeth, however, was just as flustered, blushing as she silently urged herself not to force the situation. She couldn't help but imagine her father's furious reaction if he were to walk in on them. After a moment of tense silence, the prince looked up at her and asked what had happened with the match, wanting to know if he had earned her father's approval. As Lisbeth watched her father walk away, Marquis Douglas reflected on the prince's remarkable tactical sense and the sheer pressure he exuded. He felt a pang of sympathy, wondering about the treatment Rudolph must have endured in the palace. With a grimace, he resolved that he could no longer simply stand by and watch. He turned back to his daughter, his expression firm. This, he declared, was about his precious daughter and his son. With newfound conviction, he instructed Lisbeth to remain by Prince Rudolph's side. Returning to Rudolph's bedside, Lisbeth found him resting with his head in her lap. She gently informed him that he had won, confirming that her father now acknowledged him. Relieved, the prince murmured that he was glad. She looked down at him with a warm, blushing smile, telling him he had done well. Gazing up at her, his own face slightly flushed, Rudolph offered a simple, heartfelt thank you. His gratitude was met with a moment of quiet stillness as he continued to rest peacefully in her care. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the estate under the light of the full moon, the maid Maya clenched her fists in a furious outburst. She cried out in frustration, lamenting how desperately she had wanted to attend Lisbeth's birthday party. Her anger subsided into dejection as she slumped over a desk. She had particularly wanted to witness the moment Prince Rudolph gave his birthday present to Lisbeth, a gift she herself had been asked to procure for him. She pictured a tender scene in her mind. Rudolph's mother, Beatrice, presenting a beautiful aquamarine ring to a younger version of the prince, telling him it would look perfect on him. In her own daydream, Maya giggled with pride, feeling she had found the perfect item. In reality, however, the prince had made a different choice. Back in his room, he thought of his maid, apologizing to her in his mind. He couldn't bring himself to give the gift just yet. He simply wanted to stay like this, resting with Lisbeth as she gently held his face for just a little longer. 2 weeks have passed since the turmoil of Lisbeth's birthday. In a quiet garden gazebo, Prince Rudolph sits with her, a question lingering in the air. What does she think of his present? During their meeting, Lisbeth's eyes sparkle as she admires a beautiful, star-shaped ring on her finger. She thanks Prince Rudolph profusely, promising to cherish it forever. Maya, standing nearby, compliments the stunning ring, guessing it must have been chosen by an exceptionally talented maid. He explains that he had wanted to give it to her on her birthday, but the timing just didn't work out, for which he is sorry. Lisbeth quickly dismisses his apology, noting that so much was happening that day. Maya adds that she was quite surprised to see him return with his face all swollen. He tells her he is simply happy to see her again. Maya enthusiastically agrees, confessing that her own heart ached during their time apart. She gazes fondly between the prince and Lisbeth, lost in the moment. Her emotional outburst is cut short by a realization, and her expression flattens as she remembers she is not, in fact, part of the couple. She clears her throat loudly, drawing the couple's attention back to her. With a professional smile back in place, she asks Prince Rudolph what he plans to do from now on. He leans forward, his expression turning serious. He states that there is something he needs to discuss, and that there are also matters he will need both of their help with. Before elaborating, he rises from his seat and scans the surrounding area. Maya, however, reassures him that he need not worry, as there are no eavesdroppers around. He settles back into his chair, considering Maya's assurance. Internally, he reflects that while she may be right, he actually wants his enemies to be listening in. He then reveals his intention, to join forces with someone from the royal family. He then delivers the shocking conclusion to his statement, specifying that he plans to ally with one of his 3 older brothers. The revelation leaves Lisbeth stunned. He begins by detailing the political landscape, starting with his 3 older brothers. The first prince, Frederick, possesses overwhelming financial power and natural charisma. Skilled in both diplomacy and internal affairs, and backed by the central nobility, his position is seemingly unshakable. The second prince, Oscar, son of the second queen, commands the martial nobility and holds greater influence than even Frederick in times of war. Finally, the third prince, Robin, is engaged to the daughter of the Margravial House of Anderson, which guards the western border and vital trade routes. He explains that each of them is aiming for the throne and seeks the power of the Farkrantz family, which boasts the greatest military in the empire. He reflects on his own situation, realizing that until now, he had no power. But after becoming engaged to Lisbeth, he has become a key figure in the succession struggle. The power balance between the 3 could now shift drastically depending on his actions. Lisbeth processes this information, concluding that for the 3 princes, joining forces with him would be the quickest path to the throne. Maya, standing beside her, asks if he plans to leverage this new position to elevate his own status within the imperial palace. He corrects her assumption, leaning back in his chair with his eyes closed. He states plainly that he has no interest in the throne or any position in the palace. His true desire, he explains, is to join forces with someone who can ensure his safety, making it known that he has no ambitions of his own. Lisbeth immediately grasps his strategy. She realizes this is why he was concerned about spies earlier. He confirms this, adding that if any spies from his brothers overhear their conversation, they will report back that he has no ambitions, and if they are interested, they will come to him. But he trails off, and Maya, with a determined look, points out that there is no one present to listen in. She declares that this is where she comes in. He asks if he can leave this task to her, and she responds with an enthusiastic, of course, giving 2 thumbs up and declaring that spreading rumors is her specialty. Lisbeth watches her maid's energetic display, a little taken aback. Rudolph then turns back to Lisbeth, apologizing for using her family's reputation in this manner. She dismisses his apology, stating it's not a problem, but her expression reveals a deeper concern as she notes that it sounds like he has no interest in the throne. She leans forward, looking at him intently. If that's the case, she asks, what are your plans for the future? He explains that he has no need for the imperial throne or any status within the royal family. His only wish was for a small territory in the countryside where he could live a quiet life. That, at least, is what he thought right after recovering from the poison. He looks at her, his expression now serious, and admits, but now, I feel differently. He explains to Lisbeth that his old plan is no longer viable. Now that he has someone he needs to protect, simply moving to the countryside won't be enough. He knows that people will either try to use his position for their own gain or seek to kill him out of fear. His expression hardens with resolve. He declares that he wants power, the power to stand against any threat, to protect those he cares about, and to protect himself. As Lisbeth silently processes his declaration, Maya, the maid, lets out a soft chuckle. She remarks to the prince that the path he has chosen is definitely not an easy one. Lisbeth, however, offers her full support. She tells Rudolph that his eyes reflect the resolve to walk a thorny path, and she can see he still has the same strong heart he did that day. She reassures him that it will be all right, expressing her unwavering belief that he will make it through. The scene then shifts to the grand exterior of the Zodiac Palace, the seat of the imperial family. Inside a vast throne room, Marquis Douglas Farkrantz kneels before the emperor. He thanks His Majesty for granting him an audience, but the emperor, looking down from his throne, dismisses the formalities and asks him to state his business. The Marquis explains that the matter concerns Prince Rudolph and his own daughter, Lisbeth, He reminds the emperor that both are 14 and will be attending the Imperial Academy the following year. He then makes his formal request. In order to foster a better relationship between the two, he would like for Prince Rudolf to come and stay at the Farkrantz family residence. The Marquis elaborates, suggesting that if the prince is being treated poorly at the palace, his family can protect him. He adds that a year would be enough time to thoroughly train the boy. After a moment of consideration, the emperor delivers a blunt refusal. "I won't allow it." Stunned, the Marquis demands to know why. The emperor declares with finality that Rudolf is still a prince of the Baldyke Empire, and he cannot permit him to live as a guest in a vassal's house. The matter is decided. He presses the Marquis for his other reasons. The Marquis remains silent, considering his next words. The Marquis's mind races. He knows that if he were to lose his beloved son, Beatrice would be heartbroken. He internally scoffs at the thought of that foxwoman, revealing his disdain. Realizing his first approach has failed, he pivots. He proposes an alternative, to allow his daughter, Lisbeth, along with a few of her attendants, to enter the imperial palace and stay by Prince Rudolf's side. The emperor contemplates the new request. He admits that sending Lisbeth into the dangerous environment of the imperial palace is a painful prospect, but he cannot sacrifice Prince Rudolf, the boy who is set to become his son-in-law. The Marquis presses his case, declaring that Lisbeth is strong and will not be intimidated by the palace's atmosphere. He adds that if he wishes to train the prince, he can simply visit the palace daily. Seeing his vassal's strong insistence, the emperor lets out a weary sigh, seemingly conceding the point. His curiosity piqued by the Marquis's conviction, he asks if Prince Rudolf has demonstrated some quality that would warrant such dedication. The Marquis answers with a simple, firm yes. This confirmation sparks a memory. The emperor reveals that he recently had an opportunity to spar with the prince himself. He muses aloud, a flicker of surprise on his face, questioning if pitting the boy against the famed Obsidian War Demon wasn't too reckless. A confident smile spreads across the Marquis's face. He assures the emperor it was not reckless in the slightest, noting that the event clearly captured His Majesty's interest. With unwavering belief, he declares that with the right guidance, Prince Rudolf will one day surpass even his own legendary skill. He feels a surge of triumph, believing his assessment was correct. He concludes that the emperor must have known about Rudolf's immense talent from the very beginning. He looks towards the throne, expecting to see the face of a proud father, but the expression he sees shocks him to his core. The emperor's face is a mask of dark intensity, not the look of a doting father proud of his son's talent. The Marquis recoils, his triumphant realization shattering in an instant. His mind reeled with the implications of the emperor's dark expression. He couldn't comprehend it. If His Majesty truly knew of Rudolf's talent, why hadn't he helped develop it for the good of the royal family? There were countless ways he could have supported his son, even training him as a knight to protect the other princes. As the emperor let out a soft, chilling laugh, the Marquis announced his departure. As he turned to leave, the emperor's voice stopped him. Regarding the matter of his daughter, the emperor stated coolly Lord Farkrantz would owe him one. The Marquis tensed, the weight of the favor settling upon him. He stormed out of the throne room and down a long, sunlit colonnade, slamming his hand against a stone pillar in a burst of fury. Damn it! He cursed into the empty hall. He hurried on, his mind racing with the horrifying realization. Prince Rudolf was being intentionally mistreated. But why? Why would his own father, the emperor, treat him with such disdain? The truth settled upon him with grim certainty. The one who ignored the talented prince, the one who created an environment where he was belittled, was none other than the emperor himself. With his jaws set in grim determination, the Marquis resolved that if that was the case, he would have to enact a plan of his own. Meanwhile, at the prince's residence, Rudolf casually asked Lisbeth if it was all right for her to stay for so long. Seated together in a garden gazebo, he voiced his concern that her father might be worried about her extended visit. Lisbeth looked up, momentarily surprised by his question. She beamed, reassuring him that it was perfectly fine. In fact, she announced with a bright smile, she would be living there starting today. Her attendant shrieked with delight, adding that Lisbeth's room had already been cleaned and redecorated. Maya, however, was stunned, turning to the prince to ask if he had known about this arrangement. He was completely caught off guard, demanding to know why Maya hadn't told him. The maid apologized, explaining she thought it might be an inconvenience. Lisbeth also offered an apology, insisting that wasn't her intention, while her attendant cheerfully declared it was all a surprise. Elsewhere in the palace, Prince Robin sat at a messy dining table as his henchman approached. The attendant informed him of a meeting the next afternoon with a Sheila-sama regarding clothing and gifts. Robin snapped, telling him not to bother him with trivial questions and to just pick something out. He added a chilling threat. Ask again, and he would kill him. The henchman flinched back in terror. He lounged at a table, casually dabbing his mouth with a napkin while his attendant knelt on the floor nearby. Having heard a rumor that his brother was showing an interest in romance and seeking a fiancée, he demanded to know if there was any juicy dirt on the one he called that pig Rudolph. His attendant stammered an apology, but another servant stepped forward to deliver startling news. Prince Rudolf, he reported, was already engaged to the daughter of the Farkrantz family. The prince scoffed, questioning who would even want to marry such a person. Unfamiliar with the name, he asked about the family's origins. His attendant clarified that it was the prestigious house belonging to Douglas Sama, a revelation that left Robin visibly stunned. His shock instantly curdled into a violent rage. He kicked the table with tremendous force, sending its contents crashing to the floor and striking his servant. He roared that the filthy pig was getting too full of himself for securing an engagement to such an important family. As his fury peaked, a young woman with dark hair watched him with a faint smile. Face flushed with anger, Prince Robin made a vow. He would crush his brother. He would destroy Rudolph's engagement, no matter what it took. A devil's hand was now creeping towards the fourth prince. In a sunlit palace corridor, Prince Rudolph stops in his tracks, flustered. Before him stands Lisbeth Farkrantz, who offers a warm good morning. Overwhelmed, the prince can only stammer a greeting in return. They stand in a moment of charged silence. Lisbeth had only just begun living in the palace the day before, a stay that is set to last for an entire year. Their minds, however, are anything but silent. Lisbeth is captivated, thinking Prince Rudolph is simply too wonderful. She marvels at his silver hair, shining in the sun, and his amber eyes, wondering if she could possibly be the happiest girl alive. At the same time, Rudolph is equally smitten, thinking Lisbeth is overwhelmingly beautiful. He admires the contrast of her dark hair against her pale skin, believing himself to be the luckiest person in the world. The intensity of their mutual admiration is too much. Together, they feel their hearts can't take it so early in the morning, letting out a shared, silent scream of overwhelming emotion. Later, at the breakfast table, a single piece of cooked carrot sits abandoned on an otherwise clean plate. Prince Rudolph is the one responsible. His maid, Maya, approaches with hands on her hips, asking if he is leaving his carrots again. He protests weakly, asking if it isn't fine to leave just one or two. She firmly disagrees, scolding him that he won't grow big and strong if he doesn't eat properly, and that he must stop leaving food behind. Rudolph complains that he isn't a child anymore. From the side, a steward observes to the chef that his highness has really mellowed out. The steward elaborates, stating that he thinks the prince is like a whole different person since the poisoning attempt. The chef agrees, remarking that Maya is impressive for standing her ground. He recalls that the prince used to fire any cook who dared put carrots in his meals. Noticing the exchange, Lisbeth holds up a piece of carrot on her fork. She recalls that he has changed since they got engaged and asks him directly, "You don't like carrots, Prince Rudolph?" He admits that he doesn't. With a gentle smile, Lisbeth says it's fine and that she will take what's left, adding that the chef would surely prefer someone enjoyed the food. As Maya tries to protest Lisbeth spoiling him, Rudolph is left speechless by her kindness, and the chef looks on with an expression of pure relief and gratitude. He slams his fist onto the table with a resounding thud, his face scrunched in disgust. The surrounding staff, Maya, the steward, and the chef, recoil in shock at his sudden outburst. Despite the prince's reaction, the chef claps his hands in admiration for Lisbeth. He marvels that Prince Rudolph actually ate a carrot, calling it a miracle. Lisbeth simply smiles, a picture of calm satisfaction. The maids, Maya and her colleague, watch the scene unfold with relief. Seeing Prince Rudolph looking so pleased with himself, they agree that with Lisbeth as his fiancée, His Highness's happiness will surely be all right. The chef expresses his profound relief, glad that he wasn't fired. He reflects on the recent downsizing, where Maya had to dismiss nearly half the staff who held ill toward the prince. Sometime later, after the meal has concluded and the room has emptied, Rudolph's voice calls out for Lisbeth. He approaches her, asking if she would like to go for a walk, mentioning there's a place he'd like to show her. He quickly adds that she should only come if she isn't too tired, but Lisbeth, flustered and blushing, enthusiastically agrees at once, declaring that a walk sounds lovely. As they walk away together, Lisbeth can barely contain her excitement, internally celebrating that His Highness invited her out. Rudolph, meanwhile, glances back with a slight blush, worrying if he seems strange at his invitation. He leads her out into a beautiful garden on the palace grounds. As Lisbeth holds a parasol against the sun, Maya watches them from a distance, her expression soft as she observes the place they've gone to. Rudolph asks if she remembers it, and she confirms that she does. With tears welling in her eyes, Lisbeth exclaims that the place hasn't changed at all, remembering that it was here they first met 9 years ago. The row of trees stands silently, just as it did all those years ago, bearing witness to their shared memory. Her mind drifts back 9 years, to a day filled with sunlight and falling petals. A younger, beaming Rudolph pulls her along by the hand, his excitement infectious as they run together through the garden. He had led her to a clearing where they knelt amongst the flowers. With gentle focus, he wove a crown of white blossoms for her, while she held a single stem, watching him with a quiet, happy expression. The simple gift brought radiant smiles to both their faces, a moment of pure, shared joy. The memory fades, bringing them back to the present. Rudolph suggests they head back, mentioning that Maya should have tea ready. Lisbeth agrees, but then realizes with a start that she's forgotten her parasol. As she hesitates, Rudolph cheerfully offers to go find it for her. He turns and walks back along the stone path, leaving Lisbeth to wait by the garden entrance. He seems unbothered by the task, simply happy to help. His pleasant walk is cut short by an unwelcome voice. Prince Robin stands before him, a sneer on his face, remarking on the coincidence of running into a filthy pig in such a place. Rudolph is stunned, questioning why his brother is there when he was supposed to be under house arrest. Robin closes the distance, his expression menacing. He dismisses Rudolph's question as unimportant, instead leaning in with a look of malice to bring up the fact that Rudolph got engaged. He remains outwardly calm, though his mind races. He had figured one of his brothers would make a move sooner or later. It just happened to be Robin first. He quickly deduces his brother's intent. Robin likely wants to be set up with the Farkrantz house in exchange for refraining from violence. His brother's face twists into a shadowy, predatory grin as he makes his demand clear and simple. Hand her over. Your fiancé. The words strike Rudolph, whose eyes widen in shock. Rudolph struggles to comprehend the audacity. He questions Robin, pointing out that his brother already has a fiancé and asking if he's cheating before the wedding. Robin scoffs, reminding Rudolph that for royalty, having concubines isn't unusual, and as the son of a mere concubine himself, Rudolph shouldn't act so high and mighty. He stood firm as his brother, Prince Robin, continued his tirade, his face contorted into a wide, manic grin. Robin declared that Rudolph, the filthy pig, would not be allowed to have anything for himself. This, he snarled, included his fiancée, staking a claim on her and vowing that he would not allow the union. He looked upon his brother's sneering face with disgust. This was the man they called the third prince, Robin. The reality, Rudolph realized, was far worse than he had imagined. His brother was unappealing, simple-minded, and utterly vile. Having grasped the truth, he calmly stated, "That's enough." He understood now that Robin likely didn't care about gaining the military power of House Farkrantz. This was all because Robin couldn't stand the idea of Rudolph's status rising. Angered by the response, Robin questioned if he was going to talk back, then lunged forward, roaring that it was now just a little brotherly fight and that the pig should brace himself. As Prince Robin lunges toward Prince Rudolph with a snarl, Lisbeth Farkrantz swiftly intervenes. With a sharp movement, she hooks the handle of her umbrella around Robin's ankle, yanking him off balance mid-stride. The hook of her umbrella sends him tumbling through the air. Rudolph and Maya watch in stunned silence as the third prince crashes face-first into the stone path with a sickening thud, coughing and gasping from the impact. He pushes himself up, face bruised and bleeding, demanding to know if she realizes he is the third prince. Lisbeth calmly approaches, feigning concern. She claims he simply lost his footing and fell, startling her, before introducing herself as the eldest daughter of the Farkrantz family and fiancée to Prince Rudolph. Her feigned innocence vanishes in an instant. Her eyes narrow with cold fury as she leans in and delivers a chilling threat. If anything happens to Prince Rudolph, she will kill him. This, she explains with a sudden, sweet smile, is how dearly she holds him. She then cheerfully states that she looks forward to their acquaintance. After the confrontation, they report that they found Prince Robin unconscious from his fall. As his attendant rushes to his side, Rudolph and Lisbeth turn and return to Scorpio Palace. There, they are met with the fury of Maid Maya. She stands in Rudolph's study, fists clenched, demanding to know why both of them left her behind. Lisbeth offers a placating apology, admitting she just wanted it to be the two of them today, but promises Maya can come next time. Rudolph observes that Lisbeth's true feelings are slipping out. For her part, Maya laments that if she had been with them, she would never have allowed Prince Robin anywhere near Rudolph, realizing she missed something interesting. Rudolph, seated at his desk, brings the conversation back to the political implications. He states that this incident eliminates any possibility of joining hands with Prince Robin, though he clarifies that Robin was never a viable option to begin with, as he has already aligned himself with their older brother, Prince Frederick. She acknowledges the political reality, but adds that the main reason for her actions was Robin's attempt to harm her. Lisbeth then asks Rudolph which of his brothers he intends to ally with, suggesting Prince Oscar, the second prince. He looks at her intently, rejecting her suggestion. With a determined expression, Rudolph declares that the one he has his sights on is not Oscar, but the first prince, Frederick. His declaration is met with immediate confusion. Maya questions the logic, pointing out that an alliance with Prince Frederick would inherently mean teaming up with Prince Robin. Lisbeth recoils, aghast at the thought of working with that scumbag. He calmly reassures them from his desk, stating that it will be fine because he understands the true dynamic between the brothers. He reveals that Robin harbors a deranged jealousy and a severe inferiority complex toward Frederick, a fact that startles Lisbeth. He elaborates on the source of this complex. Prince Frederick is superior in every way, possessing brilliance, talent, and overwhelming charisma. Their mother, First Empress Alicia, dotes on her gifted elder son, showing no faith in Robin. Because of this, Robin's emotional stability is precarious. He can only maintain his sense of self-worth by having someone to look down upon. He then poses a critical question to the stunned women. What would happen if he, the one Robin has always seen as inferior, were to join hands with Frederick? The very thought causes Robin's fragile pride to shatter, as he would lose the one person propping up his ego. As Maya breathes out a quiet "wah," Lisbeth grasps the strategy. She realizes that Robin would never be able to tolerate being beneath Rudolph and would, in his rage, likely turn against his own brother, Frederick. Rudolph confirms her assessment is precise. Lisbeth, however, remains skeptical. She questions the plan's simplicity, asking why Frederick would choose an alliance with a fourth prince over his own brother. He calmly explains that it is precisely because of her father, Lord Farkrantz, that Frederick will seek an alliance. Still unconvinced, She presses him on how he can be so certain. His answer is direct and simple. Prince Frederick has no military power of his own. He takes a sip from his cup, wincing slightly as he notes the heat of the beverage. He then lays out the empire's political landscape, a situation chronicled in historical epics. While Frederick commands immense political power centrally, it is the second prince, Oscar, who holds military superiority backed by numerous border lords. This stalemate has prolonged the struggle for the throne. Therefore, to secure his position, Frederick desperately needs the unparalleled military strength of Lord Farkrantz. Hearing this thorough and insightful breakdown of the Empire's power dynamics, Lisbeth is left completely astonished, a faint blush gracing her cheeks. Her astonishment turns to praise, as Maya enthusiastically remarks that he has analyzed both sides so thoroughly it is as if he witnessed the event himself. As Lisbeth agrees, Rudolph breaks into a nervous sweat, thinking to himself that he can never reveal the true source of his knowledge. He has already lived this future. He concludes his explanation, stating that in any case, he will wait patiently until his brother Frederick reaches out. Lisbeth and Maya, looking somewhat overwhelmed, signal their understanding. Turning to Maya, he thanks her for saving him. Flustered, she clasps her hands and pleads with him not to do anything so reckless again, promising that she will get stronger as well. Her determination suddenly boils over, and she loudly insists there is no need to worry, as she has been training properly. Her outburst catches Rudolph by surprise. Elsewhere, a dark premonition takes hold. An unseen individual is struck with a bad feeling, hoping that nothing terrible comes to pass. Under a starry night sky, the imposing silhouette of a grand palace stands against the darkness. Within its walls, a long, ornate hallway lies silent and empty, dust motes dancing in the faint light. The silence is broken by the presence of a man whose eyes burn with an intense, sweating fury. It is Prince Robin, concealed in a dark, hooded cloak, his body trembling with rage as he stands alone in the corridor. He seethes, confirming that Lisbeth is indeed living with the pig bastard Rudolph in the Scorpio Palace. He issues orders to an unseen subordinate to keep watching her and to make a copy of a key, noting she will reside there until enrolling in the Imperial Academy next year. Clutching the newly made key, he declares Rudolph and his fiancee's actions unforgivable. He enters a darkened bedroom, a menacing silhouette against the doorframe, and vows that what belongs to Rudolph now belongs to him. He lunges forward, pinning Lisbeth down onto the bed. With a growl, he declares his intent to show her exactly who holds the superior position between them. Inside a dimly lit bedroom, Prince Rudolph watches over the sleeping Lisbeth Farkrantz. A menacing thought hangs in the air, directed at him. This is your fault, Rudolph. The silent threat continues as a hand reaches toward her face. I will crush everything you hold dear. Suddenly, Lisbeth's eyes fly open. In a single, fluid motion, she strikes the man standing over her, a doppelganger of Rudolph, sending him reeling back with blood erupting from his mouth. She follows up with a powerful high kick, launching the imposter across the room to crash heavily against the far wall. Her expression hardens as she glances at her own forearm, now bleeding from a fresh, self-inflicted cut. With a flick of her wrist, she casts her blood towards her downed foe, which detonates in a violent burst of force. The imposter's face is left a swollen, bruised mess from the onslaught, a muffled groan his only response. Later, in another room, the real Prince Rudolph stands with Lisbeth, observing 3 captured men kneeling on the floor. He remarks to her with satisfaction that he told her it would all go smoothly. He points to 2 of the men, identifying them as the suspicious guards they had seen at the palace entrance earlier. The bound men, terrified, begin to plead for their lives. Maya steps forward, explaining that they were saved because she had noticed the men snooping around. With a smile, she deflects the praise, attributing their success entirely to the prince's precise instructions. 9 days earlier, he had been at his desk when he noted the presence of infiltrators in the palace, likening them to rats. His maid, Maya, immediately offered to exterminate them, but he had a different plan. He instructed Maya to leave them be, explaining his intention to deliberately create an opening. By letting them act freely, he believed his brother Robin's true objective would become clear. Back in the present, Rudolph explains that the moment he learned their target was Lisbeth's chamber, his blood boiled with rage. Nearby, a bound Prince Robin struggles futilely as Lisbeth and her attendant look on. Robin's muffled shouts of rage fill the room as he calls his brother a bastard. One of his captured retainers, kneeling beside him, demands to know if Rudolph thinks he can get away with this. As the prince watches them impassively, Maya pleads for him to stop. The retainer continues his furious outburst, revealing that they had opposed this scheme from the very beginning. He shouts that they had repeatedly warned Prince Robin not to antagonize Rudolph and to simply focus on his own duties. His words only enrage the captive prince further. Robin struggles to yell at his own man to be silent, insisting a servant has no right to speak to him. The retainer retorts that he only stole the key under the impression they were merely going to startle Rudolph, never imagining it would escalate to an assault. As Robin threatens to kill him, a venomous thought crosses his mind, that Lisbeth would be far better off with him than with that pig, Rudolph. The prince's arrogant thoughts seem to reach Lisbeth, whose expression darkens ominously. A chilling idea forms in her mind. Perhaps she should assist and ensure this fool can never produce an heir. Maya, sensing the dangerous shift, quickly intervenes, pleading for her to stop, despite admitting she finds the idea appealing. The intensity of the moment even startles Rudolph. A calmer voice diffuses the tension, suggesting there is no need to take such a dangerous risk. The best course of action, the voice concludes, is to hand Prince Robin over to the Emperor. The consequences of his actions will be severe. For a man who is already engaged, attempting to assault his younger brother's fiancée is a scandal of unprecedented magnitude. His engagement will be annulled, and he will face years of confinement or, at worst, banishment from the imperial family. Despite the gravity of the punishment, Lisbeth seems concerned, asking Rudolph if he is truly okay with this outcome. He simply smiles, reassuring her that as long as his brother is gone from his sight, it is enough. The most important thing, he adds, is that she is unharmed. His casual demeanor, however, seems to trouble her. His attention then turns to the captured retainers. While they are identified as Robin's men and appear to have been coerced into participating, it is understood that their punishment will ultimately be far harsher than that of the prince they serve. Prince Rudolph bursts through a set of doors, his expression one of sheer panic. He shouts that the situation is terrible, warning that in some cases, it could even lead to death. Lisbeth, startled, asks him what is wrong. Before he can explain, the doors behind him open to reveal a regal woman flanked by 2 attendants. She greets Rudolph coolly, identifying herself as First Empress Alicia, the mother of Robin and Frederick. Rudolph, Lisbeth, and her attendant are all frozen in shock at her sudden arrival. He quickly realizes she must have learned of the situation through her spies, though her appearance is far sooner than he anticipated. Composing himself, he formally addresses Empress Alicia and asks what brings her to his palace. She smiles condescendingly, claiming she heard a commotion and grew curious about the source of scream. Her tone sharpens as she demands his attention, calling him a pig. Her expression hardens into a stern glare. She warns Prince Rudolph that, depending on his answer, this matter could easily tarnish his credibility. He turns away for a moment, understanding that she knows Robin is here and has made the first move. Lisbeth asks for clarification, and Rudolph explains that as the administrator of the Scorpio Palace, any trouble that arises falls under his responsibility. He then turns back to the Empress, ready to reveal the truth. He realizes this is his chance to seize the upper hand. He begins his explanation, stating that a rat slipped into the palace last night and went on a rampage, giving his guards a hard time before they finally managed to capture it. Understanding his thinly veiled metaphor, the Empress asks if he would be so kind as to hand the troublesome little rat over to her. He internally confirms her goal, to rescue Robin. Acknowledging that this will not be easy, he considers the troubling situation and decides he was just thinking of keeping a new pet in the Cancer Palace. He stands his ground, telling Empress Alicia that the incident is a failure of his own management. He argues that if he simply lets the rat go, he will have no explanation to offer the Emperor. The Empress counters smoothly, offering to personally take the rat into her care and assuring him that His Majesty will understand if she is the one to explain. He recognizes her shamelessness. If he hands Robin over so easily, the entire incident will be swept under the rug, and the fate of his retainers will be uncertain. He resolves to pursue a different course of action instead. He stands before the First Empress, holding up 3 fingers. He announces that he has 3 requests for her. If she agrees to hear them, he will hand over the rat, Prince Robin. Empress Alicia reacts with amusement, questioning if 3 requests isn't a bit greedy. Lisbeth and her attendant are stunned, realizing Rudolph is using Prince Robin as a bargaining chip. He looks her directly in the eye, insisting it is not greed. He explains that he is the one taking a risk by agreeing to her wishes and hopes she will view his terms as generous. After a moment of silent contemplation, the Empress concedes. She agrees to listen and asks what his requests are. He states his first request, that Prince Robin be kept away from the Scorpio Palace to prevent further trouble. His second request is for the Empress herself to treat the entire incident as if it never happened. The Empress accepts the first condition but questions the second, prompting Rudolph to clarify that he means for everyone to carry on as if nothing has changed. He elaborates that this also means the men from Taurus Palace, Robin and his retainers, currently bound, are to be treated as though nothing transpired. He explains that having people executed merely for serving Robin would be a dreadful outcome. The Empress finds this unexpectedly clever and agrees to his second request, thanking him. She then asks for his final request, hoping it will be mutually beneficial like the first 2. She recognizes that his plan cleverly avoids creating unnecessary discord with Robin's other retainers, which is also a gain for her. His demeanor shifts, a shadow crossing his face as he begins to speak. He reminds Empress Alicia that, as she knows, he feels out of place in the palace. He continues, stating it is only natural that someone like him is despised. He explains that his mother was merely the Emperor's concubine, yet she dared to demand inheritance rights for her illegitimate child, an act as audacious as asking for a priceless jewel. Facing the First Empress Alicia, Prince Rudolph apologizes for his indirectness. The Empress, unmoved, cuts straight to the point, demanding to know exactly what he is asking for. He explains that he knows his place, confessing that he had wished to live a quiet life, far from the burdens of the throne. A brief memory of him and Lisbeth surfaces as he reassures her not to worry. Continuing his explanation, he notes that his engagement to Lisbeth has inevitably secured him the support of Marquis Farkrantz. He proposes using this as an opportunity to mend ties with his estranged brother, revealing this to be the true intention of his third request. His ultimate goal, he declares, is to mediate between them so he can form an alliance with Frederick. As Rudolph turns to leave, the Empress muses to herself. She had come to claim a rat, but instead received these grand requests from the prince himself. A small, amused smile plays on her lips. She announces that she will accept all of his requests. Rudolph thanks her, though he privately scoffs at the idea that a cold-blooded man like Frederick could feel kindness. The Empress adds that Frederick will be delighted, claiming he has always been concerned for Rudolph. As he prepares to depart, the Empress stops him. She asks if she can entrust the matter concerning the rat to him, and he agrees. She then tells him she has one more question. She asks what he thinks of his mother. Rudolph's response is immediate and cold. He thinks nothing of her. He states that she is herself, and he is himself, before turning and walking away, leaving the Empress to ponder his words with a knowing look. Elsewhere, Prince Robin slams his fist down in a fit of rage, startling Lisbeth and her attendant. He bellows that this must be Rudolph's scheme and that he would never agree to it. His outburst echoing in the hall, he storms away, leaving a stunned Lisbeth and her attendant to watch him go with worried expressions. In a quiet, sunlit courtyard, two figures spar with swords amidst the greenery and stone arches. The scene then widens to show the grand castle, the stage for these unfolding political and personal dramas. He parries a heavy blow from Marquis Farkrant's wooden sword. The Marquis comments on the misfortune the young prince has suffered, and Rudolph, straining, affirms it. He asks about Empress Alicia, and the Marquis informs him that she has already sent his brother, Prince Robin, to the academy dormitory. The Marquis declares that his last strike was too lenient. With a powerful downward swing, he shatters Rudolph's wooden sword, the pieces flying apart with a sharp crack. His weapon broken, Rudolph sits on the ground, defeated. The Marquis announces that their training is over for the day, and the prince meekly agrees. This training is a recent development. Since Lisbeth's arrival, Marquis Farkrant himself has been teaching Rudolph swordsmanship. For the prince, it is a heaven-sent opportunity to grow strong enough to protect Lisbeth with his own hands. Later, over tea, Rudolph reflects on his guilt for taking up the Marquis's time when he is still so weak. He resolves that he must, at the very least, work hard to grow stronger, calling out to the Marquis, as if to renew his vow. Lisbeth's attendant leans forward, explaining the political reality of their situation. She insists that with Empress Alicia's arrival, they had no choice but to hand over Lord Robin. Had they surrendered him unconditionally, they would have been scorned. Without concessions, conflict was certain. Lisbeth affirms that her attendant speaks the truth. She and Lisbeth press their point with intensity. Rudolph looks down at the table, quietly stating that he already knows and they do not need to tell him. The Marquis interrupts, his expression shadowed and serious. He asks Lisbeth if she thought he was angry about his name being used as leverage in the negotiation. He states that it is the opposite. He noticed how fervent Prince Rudolph was during his swordsmanship lessons. He then lets out a booming laugh, his serious demeanor vanishing completely. He declares that he is actually overjoyed to see how rapidly His Highness is improving. Rudolph stares, utterly stunned by the revelation. He sat across from Marquis Farkrantz, who broached a delicate subject. The Marquis stated he had heard that, despite holding the right of succession, the prince had no interest in the throne. Rudolph, looking somewhat surprised, confirmed this was true. He elaborated on his position, confirming that the Marquis's information was correct. He clarified that it wasn't just a lack of desire for the throne, but a complete lack of interest in the imperial family itself. He internally lamented his situation, believing his only worth was his connection to the imperial line and nothing more. He felt that the Marquis must see some advantage in his royal blood, but he was certain he could not meet such expectations and silently asked for forgiveness. The Marquis, however, seemed pleased by this, chuckling to himself that it was all the better. As Rudolph looked on in confusion, the Marquis began to explain something the prince might not know. He revealed a critical piece of information. Aside from Lisbeth, the House of Farkrantz had no heir. They had been considering adopting from a branch family, but then her engagement to Rudolph was arranged. The Marquis then turned to the prince, a proposition forming on his lips. The question was direct and shocking. Would he be willing to join the Farkrantz family as an adopted son-in-law? His eyes widened as the full weight of the offer struck him. If he were to marry into the Marquis's household, he would be freed from his imperial status. He began to voice his doubts, but was cut off by a booming laugh from the Marquis. The prince questioned if this was truly acceptable for someone like him, calling himself a weak man with nothing to offer. The Marquis countered this, praising the prince's remarkable judgment and adaptability, even at this early stage of his training. He declared with confidence that with continued discipline and strength building, Rudolph would surely surpass all other swordsmen his age in just half a year. The prince, flustered, dismissed it as flattery. His expression hardened as he insisted that he only speaks the truth when it concerns matters of martial skill. Lisbeth, who had been listening quietly, voiced her agreement, stating that her father was right. Lisbeth's attendant praises Prince Rudolph's gentle heart and mercy, while Lisbeth adds that his negotiation with Empress Alicia was splendid. She declares with certainty that, in time, he will even surpass her father as a swordsman. The Marquis reinforces their words, assuring the prince that neither he nor his daughter believe him to be without value. Overcome with emotion, Rudolph can only manage a choked whisper of thanks. As a ribbon falls from her hair, Lisbeth looks at him with tears welling in her eyes, pleading with him not to think of himself as worthless. She insists that to her, he is irreplaceable. Her heartfelt words finally break through his defenses, and a single tear traces a path down his cheek. He looks up at them, a genuine smile spreading across his face as the Marquis places a reassuring hand on his head. In that moment, Rudolph feels he has finally found a true family. Meanwhile, under the light of a full moon, a different scene unfolds at the Sauvelier Manor. A choked sob echoes from a dark, empty hallway. Inside, the second son of the Sauvelier family stands over a coffin, questioning why his brother Patrick had to be the one to die. His grief twists into rage as he recalls how their father doted only on Patrick, casting him aside. With his brother gone, he is now the heir, and he seethes with the thought that if only Wilhelm had died instead. His resentment culminates in a brutal memory or vision. His father's face contorted in shock as an axe strikes him down. With his path cleared, the Sauvelier's son laughs maniacally. He declares his intent to become a hero whose name is etched into history, vowing to succeed without fail. He is confident, for he possesses a book containing knowledge of a history that no one else knows. 3 months after the negotiation with Empress Alicia, Prince Rudolph's training with Lisbeth has clearly intensified. He collapses to the ground, panting heavily after a sparring session. Despite his exhaustion, he acknowledges that thanks to her and his father, he has grown stronger. As they rest, Maid Maya approaches, complimenting them both on the practice swings. She then presents an ornate, wax-sealed envelope to the prince, informing him that a letter has arrived. Rudolph immediately recognizes the seal, realizing it is from Empress Alicia. He opens the letter as Lisbeth inquires about its contents, guessing it might be about establishing friendly terms with Prince Frederick. Rudolph confirms she is close. The letter is an invitation to the Imperial New Year's celebration, to be hosted at the palace that very week. A look of determination crosses his face as he realizes this means he will finally meet his older brother. The night of the celebration arrives. Under a crescent moon, the grand and imposing Zodiac Palace stands ready to host the Empire's nobility. Inside, the vast, vaulted hall is filled with elegantly dressed guests. Nobles from across the land mingle and converse, the air buzzing with anticipation. Among the crowd, the Farkrantz family and their allies turn their heads in unison as a powerful voice calls for everyone's attention. From a high balcony, Emperor Karl I Baldyke raises a glass to the assembly. He thanks them for gathering despite their busy schedules and welcomes them to celebrate the dawn of a new year for the Baldyke Empire. His address continues as he gestures towards the grand entrance below. He announces his intention to introduce his beloved family and asks the crowd to welcome them with a round of applause. As the crowd applauds, 2 regal women begin their descent. They are formally introduced, the first Empress, Alicia, and the second Empress, Katerina. One of them steps forward, the sharp click of her heels echoing in the hall. A soft, intrigued utterance of "oh my" hangs in the air. Just as the court was settling, a flamboyant figure made a grand entrance. It was Beatrice, the emperor's beloved concubine, who apologized breezily for her tardiness, claiming she couldn't get her makeup right. The other noble women reacted with shock and disgust, whispering amongst themselves about her vulgarity and how she was tarnishing the royal family's dignity. As the whispers about Beatrice filled the hall, 2 commanding figures strode forward, instantly capturing the attention of the entire assembly. Their arrival sparked a new wave of murmurs. The nobles identified them as first Prince Frederick, praised for his charm and for being top of his class at the Imperial Academy, and second Prince Oscar, noted as being even more handsome and a stronger swordsman than his elder brother. The gossip also touched upon the absence of Prince Robin and the recent cancellation of Oscar's engagement, a development said to have been difficult for Empress Alicia. Just then, another pair made their entrance, drawing every eye. Prince Rudolph walked confidently, hand in hand with Lisbeth Farkrantz. The crowd buzzed, confirming the rumors of their engagement. Some sneered, questioning why the prestigious Farkrantz family would align with someone like him, while others noted that Rudolph had changed completely, becoming a person of character after the assassination attempt. He heard their whispers, the disdainful comments about the son of a prostitute being part of the royal family. They saw him as a disgrace, and now that he was gaining power, they wondered with fear what he might do. The speculation continued, with some nobles spreading a new rumor, that Rudolph might be adopted into the Farkrantz family. If that were to happen, they reasoned, he would lose any claim to the throne, and the imperial dignity would be preserved. This highlighted the crucial question hanging over the court. Which side would Prince Rudolph take? His choice between Prince Frederick's faction and Prince Oscar's faction would inevitably shift the delicate balance of power among the heirs to the throne. As they proceeded, Rudolph quietly told Lisbeth that the distasteful rumors about her being his intended were spreading thanks to Maya's efforts. He instructed her to pay close attention to his movements. From a distance, First Empress Alicia watched the pair with a cold, severe expression. He then thought to himself that with all eyes on him, their plan should begin at any moment. Lisbeth met his gaze, her expression intent. Just then, a voice from nearby called out his name. Turning, Rudolph saw his brother, Prince Oscar, approaching them with a drink in hand. Oscar offered his congratulations on the engagement. Rudolph thanked him and formally introduced his fiancée, Lisbeth Farkrantz, who offered a polite greeting. He extends a hand, holding a glass of red wine, and invites Rudolf to speak with him for a moment. He notes that his younger brother is surely old enough to drink now. Rudolf, however, politely declines, apologizing to his brother and explaining that he has a prior engagement. Just then, the first Empress Alicia arrives, confirming that Prince Frederick is waiting. She gestures for Rudolf to follow her, and he offers one last apology to Oscar. As he turns to leave, Rudolf silently thanks his brother for the perfect assist. His public refusal sends a shockwave through the gathered nobles. They murmur amongst themselves, realizing the significance of the event. Rudolf, who had never been noticed by anyone, was approached by his brother, only to be turned down in favor of Frederick. The message is unmistakable. He has joined the Frederick faction. He walks on, contemplating that once this news spreads, his poor reputation might finally begin to improve. He feels he has taken another step toward the peaceful life he desires. Lisbeth, walking beside him, asks if he feels any guilt for turning Oscar down. Rudolf dismisses the idea, explaining that since his brother's invitation was a political move, he has no reason to feel guilty for his own political refusal. Meanwhile, on a balcony overlooking the hall, Prince Frederick watches his brother Oscar approach. He smirks, commenting on Oscar's recent rejection. Later, Oscar discusses the event with his mother, the second Empress Katerina. He insists he is not being pessimistic, but observes that the Rudolf of old would never have been capable of such a politically savvy response. He concludes that it is best to view Rudolf as an entirely different person now, a change that, he admits, makes him want his brother on his side even more. His calm demeanor shatters, replaced by a look of intense, manic ambition. He reveals his true, terrifying goal. For his own path of conquest, he will annihilate the royal family with amber eyes. At a grand dining table, Prince Rudolf sits with Lisbeth Farkrantz, the first Empress Alicia, and the first Prince, Frederick. The formal dinner is quiet, the air thick with unspoken protocol. His gaze settles on Frederick. Rudolf recalls that there is scant information about the first prince, even within the historical epic of Wilhelm. The only memory that surfaces is a grim one. Frederick is assassinated early in the timeline by the very tyrant Rudolf is destined to become. As this thought crosses his mind, the first Empress Alicia turns to him, remarking that this is the first occasion they have actually spoken face to face. Without any hesitation, Rudolf confirms that it is. He inwardly acknowledges the truth of her words regarding conversation, but his expression hardens as he remembers that they have, in fact, met once before. A memory drifts into focus, a much younger version of himself, sitting alone and engrossed in a book. The memory sharpens. It was during a tea party hosted by Empress Alicia. While the other children played together in the garden, he had kept to himself. The children's play was far from innocent. A young prince Robin rode on the back of a small girl, whipping her with a twig and shouting for his horse to run faster. As the girl cried for him to stop, Robin only taunted her, calling her a pig. From a nearby table, a young Prince Frederick watched the cruelty unfold with a silent, impassive gaze. Robin then stood before the other children, declaring himself the gatekeeper to Frederick. This prompted the others to clamor for the first prince's attention, vowing to become his consort or attendant. Frederick observed them all, musing on how, unlike himself, his brother was needed by so many. He then coldly questioned what he could possibly gain from having any of them as his attendants. The children shouted their promises to be a beautiful wife, to be a protector. But it was the girl Robin had tormented who pushed herself up from the dirt. With tears in her eyes, but a fire of determination, she shouted that she would prove herself useful as his right hand. She and the other children were stunned into silence. Prince Frederick, looking up from his book, coldly stated that since there was nothing to be gained from a friendship with them, they were merely disturbing his reading. With that, he excused himself and walked away. His words sent the young girl collapsing to the ground in despair. She couldn't understand how he could so easily discard opportunities and connections that she could never even dream of obtaining. This memory solidified Rudolf's understanding of his older brother. That was first Prince Frederick, a cold and merciless rationalist who never did anything unless it benefited him. He knew the fact that Frederick hadn't recognized him meant he was once considered worthless. But he resolved he was different now. It was an honor to even have his brother's time. He confidently presented his case, declaring that he now possessed the military strength that Frederick lacked. He intended to support his brother, backed by the full power and approval of the Marquis of the Farkrantz family. His declaration sent a ripple of understanding through the onlookers at the dinner table. Prince Frederick had accepted Prince Rudolf into his faction, a move that would change the balance of power entirely. The first Empress, Alicia, expressed her relief at the new alliance. She then turned the conversation to Rudolf's upcoming enrollment at the Imperial Academy, noting that Frederick had served as student council president and might offer advice. Though he considered it meaningless small talk, Rudolf politely replied that he respected his elder brother as a model for the students. Before the discussion could proceed, Frederick abruptly asked if their conversation was over. He then excused himself, stating he had other appointments with nobility, and rose from his seat, leaving the others in stunned silence. The sudden dismissal struck Rudolf with a harsh realization. He had been naive, overestimating himself. He understood with bitter clarity. Having completed the ritual of forming a friendship with the Farkrantz family, Frederick no longer had any reason to speak with him. He himself held no value. The only ones who mattered were the powerful family behind him. A small, humorless laugh escaped his lips. Slumped over the table, Rudolph gripped his head. Why was he so shocked? Did he really think he could achieve revenge for his past humiliation by borrowing someone else's authority? He turns to his brother Oscar, a bitter smile playing on his lips. He wonders aloud if he was truly foolish enough to expect a pleasant chat with Frederick just because he had powerful backing. As he processes the sting of his brother's dismissal, a gentle touch grounds him. Lisbeth Farkrantz takes his hand, her expression full of warmth, and assures him that she is there for him. Her simple gesture of support brings a genuine, albeit weary, smile to his face. He thanks her, addressing her formally as Lisbeth Donau. Their quiet moment is interrupted by the approach of the first Empress, Alicia. She apologizes on behalf of Prince Rudolph, explaining that her son is busy. She dismisses the entire meeting as a mere charade, a ritual meant only to display power to the other nobles. Meanwhile, Prince Frederick walks away from the gathering without a backward glance. He reflects that now that the purpose of their meeting has been fulfilled, there is nothing else that requires his attention. Just as Frederick disappears from sight, the Empress's voice cuts through the air again. She calls out to Prince Rudolph, stating that she almost forgot to tell him something, catching him by surprise. She declares that she felt the return he received for his efforts was far too little. As the first Empress, she wields considerable power and tells him to feel free to ask for anything he needs. With a grand gesture, she proclaims that from now on, they are allies, leaving both Rudolph and Lisbeth stunned. He recovers from his shock, a hint of a smile returning to his face. He accepts her generous offer, admitting to himself that he had expected her to be a much stricter person. The Empress smiles back, pleased. The newfound sense of hope is shattered in an instant. A wine glass hurtles through the air, narrowly missing his head with a sharp whistle. The glass smashes against a nearby wall as a drunken, slurring voice calls his name. It is his mother, Beatrice, stumbling forward with a bottle in hand. She belligerently notes that he has stayed for quite a while, unlike his usual habit of appearing for the Emperor's greetings and then vanishing. Prince Oscar rushes to her side, urging his mother to stop, pointing out that she has had too much to drink. Her drunken rage continued unabated. As Prince Oscar yelled for her to shut up, Beatrice smashed the bottle she was holding over his head. Without a second glance at the reeling prince, she turned towards Rudolph, dismissing the first Empress as an ugly woman. Her expression twisted into a menacing sneer, saliva dripping from her lips as she proposed a private family chat, her voice low and threatening. She fixed her gaze on her son, demanding to know his answer. In a grand, columned hall filled with guests, Prince Rudolph stands apart, his attention captured by his mother, Beatrice, who has approached him. He looks at her with uncertainty, asking if she wishes to have a private family chat. He attempts to brush her off, stating that he has nothing in particular to discuss, and questions why she isn't with the Emperor. Beatrice simply smiles, informing him that His Majesty is occupied with official duties and that, more importantly, she has something to say. Without another word, she suddenly embraces him from behind, holding him tightly. Rudolph freezes, his body rigid with shock and confusion. He violently shoves her away, demanding to know what she is doing. The thought flashes through his mind that never, not even once in his childhood, has she ever held him. Beatrice feigns a light-hearted surprise, asking if he is going through a rebellious phase. She then begins her explanation, apologizing for not giving him the attention he deserved. Beatrice recounts her past desperation, born to a noble line that possessed nothing but a title. Her parents mismanaged their assets, leading them to lose everything and forcing her into a hellish existence of menial jobs. Her fortune changed when she was hired as a servant in the imperial palace, where she caught the eye of the emperor, his father. Continuing her story, she admits she was not from a lineage considered suitable for an emperor's official wife. It was for that very reason, she explains, that she clung so desperately to her position in the imperial house. Before long, she conceived him. Her voice cracks with emotion as she insists that everything she did was to provide him with a better life. She confesses that her fear was never for her own sake, but for his. The thought of being cast aside by the emperor terrified her most because it would mean Rudolph, too, would be left with nowhere to belong. Rudolph stares back, his expression one of pure shock. His shock gives way to a cold certainty. Looking directly at his emotional mother, he states plainly, "That's a lie." He presses his case, his voice laced with years of pain. If what she said were true, he demands to know why she neglected him. He reminds her how she always prioritized entertaining His Majesty, treating Rudolph himself as a nuisance whenever he sought her help. He forces her to recall a specific, cruel memory. As a small child, he had once asked her why she gave him birth. Her answer was chillingly direct. "Isn't it obvious? I only had you so I could stay in the imperial family." He asked her now how he could possibly believe that even those words were for his sake. Beatrice stands in stunned silence, unable to respond. He stands his ground against his mother, Beatrice, who sighs in exasperation. She calls him an insolent brat, wondering aloud who he takes after and questioning the purpose of his defiant performance. Unwavering, Rudolph simply states that he is himself. She dismisses his declaration with a casual, whatever, a smirk on her face. Rudolph watches her, a single bead of sweat trickling down his temple. The tense exchange is interrupted by a new voice. Lisbeth Farkrantz points directly at Rudolph, declaring that all the talk of him becoming her family's adopted son-in-law must surely be some kind of mistake. Beatrice ignores the interruption, her focus entirely on her son. She warns him to think carefully, demanding to know if he understands his debt to the imperial family. She spells out the consequence. If he marries into the Farkrantz family, he will be throwing away his title as a prince. Rudolf is visibly stunned by the ultimatum. Her words strike him with force. His eyes widen in a mixture of shock and fury as he internally scoffs at the idea of owing the imperial family anything, remembering only the suffering his position has brought him. He exhales sharply, trying to contain his anger. He forces himself to calm down, analyzing the woman before him. He concludes that she is simply clinging to the imperial family, desperate to protect her own status. To her, nothing is more important than him remaining within that lineage. This realization causes him to burst into unrestrained laughter. It dawns on him that, without even realizing it, he has chosen the best possible path for himself. His sudden change in demeanor leaves Beatrice utterly bewildered. His sudden laughter enrages Beatrice. "What are you smiling about?" she demands, smashing her wine glass on the floor. She orders him to wipe the smirk from his face. Before she can act further, Lisbeth steps forward, positioning herself between mother and son. She formally introduces herself as the eldest daughter of House Farkrantz and addresses Beatrice directly as mother-in-law, questioning what she is doing to her future husband. Lisbeth then accuses Beatrice of insulting her house and condemns her poor upbringing, leaving Beatrice stunned and furious. The two women now face each other, an intense, crackling energy filling the space between them. Beatrice glares, clutching her empty glass, while Lisbeth stands her ground, calm and utterly defiant. She stands with Prince Rudolf, facing his mother, and declares that she simply wishes to be with the man she loves, a sentiment Rudolf affirms. Lisbeth adds that she owes Beatrice no explanation and has never even considered taking revenge. Beatrice turns away, remarking with a small sense of satisfaction that she will take her leave. But as she walks away, her composure shatters. She spins around with a furious roar, lunging forward and screaming for them not to dare. Her charge is cut short as a glass of red liquid smashes against her face, shattering on impact. The liquid and shards of glass fly through the air as the surrounding nobles gasp in shock. The source of the assault is revealed. First Empress Alicia stands across the room, her arm still outstretched. Rudolf and Lisbeth are stunned, with Rudolf wondering why the Empress would defend him. Beatrice, bleeding from a cut on her cheek, stares at Alicia with a look of utter defeat, recognizing her as a hopeless woman. Empress Alicia's voice cuts through the silence. She addresses Beatrice directly, stating that she never fails to disgrace the imperial house whenever the emperor is on official duties and always causes trouble. She sternly orders Beatrice to return to her chambers. Utterly defeated, Beatrice complies, turning to walk away as she mutters, "As you wish." With the confrontation handled, Empress Alicia turns to the assembled guests. She apologizes for the disturbance and encourages everyone to continue with the New Year celebration. She then rejoins Rudolf and Lisbeth. Lisbeth quietly asks what was said, but Rudolf dismisses it as nothing more than a bug buzzing by. Internally, however, Alicia vows that she will never approve of their marriage and will ensure it is squashed. A nearby noblewoman notices Alicia is bleeding and offers a handkerchief, but the Empress dismisses the injury as nothing. The concerned noblewoman insists that it is not nothing, but Alicia simply sighs, commenting on how young people love to exaggerate. Her attention then shifts as the noblewoman exclaims Prince Rudolf's name, pointing out that he is bleeding too. She reaches toward a cut on his forehead, explaining that some of the glass shards must have flown his way. Reacting to his injury, his mother Beatrice shouts with alarm, ordering someone to take him to the infirmary. She warns that if the wound gets infected, the consequences will be terrible. She decides to tend to the wound herself, however, telling him to hold still as she wraps a bandage around his head. She apologizes for her earlier actions, stating that the dressing should suffice for now, all while Empress Alicia and Lisbeth watch from distance. With the prince now bandaged and seated beside Lisbeth, Empress Alicia approaches. She advises him to take care, cautioning that the wound may swell later. He looks up at the Empress, his expression filled with confusion. He asks her directly why she would defend someone like him. Her face darkens, a shadow falling over her eyes. As Lisbeth watches with concern, the Empress reveals her true motive with chilling clarity. She detests that woman, Beatrice. First Empress Alicia explains her perspective, stating that the nation and the imperial palace are everything to her. Even without the emperor's affection, she has devoted her life to the empire. She understood his duty to produce capable heirs and therefore had no objection to him taking Lady Katerina as the second empress. Her calm demeanor shatters in a furious recollection. She remembers Beatrice, Rudolf's mother, who barged into the palace as if she owned it, trampling over everything with filthy feet, laughing all the while. This memory fuels her confession to Prince Rudolf. She explains that what Beatrice defiled was the imperial palace itself, a place she loved as if it were her own child. It was because of this deep-seated hatred for his mother, she admits, that she ended up neglecting him. She then looks at him with startling sincerity, telling him that he, too, is her beloved child and a member of the imperial family. Her body moved on its own to shield him, she reveals, because an injury sustained while protecting her child is neither painful nor frightening. Rudolph is left stunned by the revelation. As he struggles to process her words, she continues, acknowledging that her confession must seem far too late for him. She muses that she must have forgotten something simple, that there must be something wrong with her. Her regret is palpable as she stands before him. She laments that if only he had remained motivated by self-interest alone, she would not be feeling this way. Her words strike a deep chord within the prince. Tears welling in his eyes, he realizes he can feel a warmth from her that he never received from his real mother. Overcome with emotion, he thanks her. His emotional moment is gently interrupted as Alicia's demeanor brightens. Apologizing for keeping them tied to a troublesome old woman, she urges the young couple, Rudolph and Lisbeth, to go and enjoy the party. Heeding her words, they join the festivities. In the grand hall, couples dance while Rudolph plays the cello and Lisbeth accompanies him on the piano as part of a small ensemble providing music for the guests. After the music and dancing conclude, a carriage travels up a hill under the night sky. It approaches a large, dark manor, its destination for the evening. She remarked that it was surprising to see such a side of Empress Alicia. Beside her in the carriage, Prince Rudolph simply agreed. He added that it was a relief, confident that the Empress would help mediate matters in the future. His gaze then shifted. A thought about Lisbeth left trailing. Noticing his hesitation, she voiced a concern of her own, mentioning Beatrice. Rudolph quickly interjected, telling her there was no need to address his mother with honorifics. He sighed with frustration, complaining that even as his mother left, she behaved with immense arrogance. He declared that while she may be his mother, she was a terrible woman. Her expression grew serious as she offered a different perspective, suggesting that Beatrice's actions seemed intentional. The prince was startled by the idea, and she urged him to think about it carefully. She began to explain her reasoning. For Beatrice to remain in the imperial palace, she requires two things: his position as the fourth prince and the affection of his majesty, the emperor. Her visit today, Lisbeth continued, was a strategic move to apply pressure regarding the first of those requirements, to maintain his position. Rudolph quietly confirmed that her assessment was correct. He remained puzzled, however, arguing that if she truly cared about her place in the palace, her recent behavior made no sense at all. Lisbeth agreed with his logic, questioning why someone so obsessed with remaining in the palace would risk being cast aside. Such outrageous antics, she reasoned, would eventually exhaust even the emperor's tolerance. This led her to a startling conclusion. His mother's actions directly contradicted her supposed intentions. It almost seemed, she posited, as if Beatrice wished to be discarded by the emperor. The implication struck the prince with stunning force. He is still reeling from the revelation about his mother, but Lisbeth calmly explains her reasoning. She tells him that Beatrice's actions only seem strange because he is sensible and level-headed, whereas a fool would simply act against reason. Continuing her explanation, she assures him that once they are married, his mother will no longer be permitted in the palace, rendering Beatrice's schemes irrelevant to them. This declaration causes Rudolph to sputter in shock, exclaiming that she is talking about distant plans when he hasn't even enrolled in the academy yet. Lisbeth, however, is resolute, insisting that the wedding will happen immediately after his graduation and that time will pass in the blink of an eye. As their carriage travels under a starry sky, their debate continues. Lisbeth is already planning a grand celebration and intends to have Maya take his measurements, while Rudolph protests that they are getting ahead of themselves and that his school uniform must come first. The scene shifts to a dark, ornate hallway. A voice muses that Rudolph has sided with the Frederick faction and now plans to enroll in the Imperial Academy. The source of the voice is revealed to be a young man with long, dark hair, sitting casually in a chair. He remarks to the Sauvilier's son that it is time for him to begin moving as well. He then dismisses a maid who has just finished her work, but she cries out in extreme distress, begging for his pardon. Unfazed, the man, addressed as Wilhelm, calmly notes that the effect of a previous dose is wearing off. As the maid clutches her head in desperation, he prepares a small vial of liquid, apologizing for having nearly forgotten. He commands the maid to open her mouth and administers the substance. She accepts it gratefully, declaring that to live and die for him is her greatest joy. He looks on with satisfaction as a knock sounds at the door. An older steward enters, apologizing for the interruption. He asks if there was any trouble at the celebration, seemingly oblivious to the scene before him, as Wilhelm assures him that everything is fine. The second son of the Sauvilier family questions an older man, confirming that no one suspects his father, Johann, is actually dead. The man, his face set with grim determination, replies with a single word: none. A cruel, toothy grin spreads across the Sauvilier son's face. He commands the man, Claude, to continue his deception by serving as his father's double. Bowing his head, Claude accepts the order from his young lord. With the conversation finished, he turns and walks toward a balcony, his coat fluttering in the night air. He reminds himself that he must return to the academy on the morrow. He stands on the balcony, the full moon illuminating the city below. In his gloved hand, he holds a small, ornate vial. His grin returns, wider and more menacing, as he declares his true ambition: to destroy the entire nation. On the way to the Imperial Academy, Lisbeth is in tears, distraught that she and Rudolph will be separated in the gender-segregated dorms. Maya chides her, reminding Lisbeth that she was supposed to be calling the prince by his nickname. another attendant, and observes that Maya is quite cute when flustered. But Maya insists they must all address each other with affection. Maya's teasing has its intended effect, as both Rudolph and Lisbeth blush deeply, shyly calling each other Rudy and Liz. Watching their reaction, Maya can't help but think how adorable the two of them are. She reminds them that they had agreed to use nicknames when their uniforms were made to feel more like classmates once they entered the academy. 3 months have passed quickly, and now, riding in their carriage, they are on their way to the entrance ceremony. Inside the carriage, Maya's teasing continues until, and Lisbeth's personal attendant and an intelligence agent for the Farkrantz family suddenly appears hanging from the doorframe, playfully telling Maya to stop bothering her employers. Lisbeth, amused, encourages and to scold the unrestrained Maya even more, while simply laughs nervously at the dynamic. Their light-hearted moment is interrupted when the carriage stops, and, having already investigated, reports that there is a complete standstill about 3 kilometers ahead. The news surprises everyone. She explains that a horse from a carriage ahead stumbled on a stone and injured its leg, blocking the road. The group realizes with dawning horror that they will not make it to the entrance ceremony in time. Faced with this dilemma, Rudolph sighs, stating that as members of the royal family, they cannot be late. He calmly suggests that running would be faster, a proposal that Lisbeth readily agrees to. He takes Lisbeth's hand, and they exit the carriage, telling Maya and they will meet them later. As the two run off, and remarks how different Lisbeth acts when she is with the prince. They set off at a brisk pace, running past the long line of stopped carriages in their determination to reach the academy. He and Lisbeth sprinted through the academy's corridors, their new uniforms crisp as they rushed past other students, including the second son of the Sauvelier family, who watched them pass with a cool gaze. Their destination loomed ahead, the magnificent spire-topped main hall of the Imperial Academy. Rudolph's expression was one of grim determination as he took in the sight. Inside the grand hall, the entrance ceremony was already underway. Rows upon rows of new students sat in silent attention, facing the instructors on the dais. They managed to find their places among the other new students just in time, blending into the crowd of uniformed youths. Once the ceremony concluded, the students filed out, walking through the sunlit stone archways of the academy grounds. The students were then guided to their homeroom. A tall, imposing instructor named Boris Armian introduced himself as their teacher for the next 3 years. He announced they would begin with introductions, one by one, starting from a designated seat. As a girl named April Svensson introduced herself, Lisbeth whispered to Rudolph that she was nervous and not good at public speaking. Following her, another student stood with a bright smile. She introduced herself as Sheila, the eldest daughter of the Anderson Frontier Marquis family, and sweetly asked everyone to treat her well. Her charming demeanor and striking figure immediately captivated the male students in the class. That name, Anderson, triggered a memory for Lisbeth. With a jolt, she realized Sheila must be Prince Robin's former fiancée. The shock sent her tumbling backward out of her chair with a loud crash, prompting their teacher to yell at her to stop making a fuss. She quickly tried to explain her outburst to a concerned Rudolph, stammering that she wasn't staring for any strange reason, only because she recognized Sheila as Robin's ex-fiancée. His attention, however, was pulled away as he realized it was his turn to speak. He stood, placing a hand over his heart. With a calm voice, he introduced himself to the class. "I am Rudolph Furstballdike." The name sent ripples through the classroom, eliciting a wide range of reactions from his new peers: shock, contempt, curiosity, and calculation. He scanned the room, finding his classmates' reactions were not as hostile as he had anticipated. He had braced himself for a wave of cold stares, but the response was surprisingly muted. His attention was drawn to one student in particular, April Svensson, who looked upon him with an expression of pure, unadulterated delight. As the teacher called for the next student, Lisbeth rose from her seat. She began her introduction, stating her name and her position as the eldest daughter of the Farkrantz family, causing Rudolph to turn toward her in surprise. She then made a stunning declaration, announcing to the entire class that she was Lisbeth, the fiancée of Prince Rudolph. With unwavering confidence, she challenged her classmates, stating that any opinions regarding the prince should be directed to her personally. Her bold proclamation left the other students stunned into silence. While the rest of the class reeled from the announcement, Sheila simply offered a calm, knowing smile. Sometime later, while walking through the academy grounds, Rudolph found his thoughts drifting to Sheila. He mused that she was quite daring, the first woman since Maya to be so unfazed by him. Lisbeth voiced her worries, suggesting it might be better to avoid attracting too much attention, but he disagreed, stressing the importance of making a strong first impression. Just then, Sheila herself appeared before them with a bright smile. She greeted Prince Rudolph and Lisbeth, declaring it an honor to be in their class and explaining that she had hoped for a chance to speak with them. She then extended an invitation for tea as a gesture of friendship. Lisbeth, however, gently refused, reminding her that they all needed to unpack at the dormitories. Hearing her name from Rudolph, Sheila became ecstatic. "You remembered my name," she cried out, surging forward to cup the prince's blushing face in her hands. The sudden intimacy left Rudolph stunned and Lisbeth frozen in silent fury. He quickly pushed her away, ordering her to stop. He accused her of being far too deliberate, declaring that while her tactics might work on another boy, his heart already belonged to Liz. Seeing through her facade, He told her it was obvious she was plotting something and that she would have to find someone else to involve. As the students depart, April Svensson stands alone, her expression unreadable. Nearby, the Sovalier's son walks with Lisbeth, looking flustered as he worries he said something embarrassing. From an elevated walkway, Lisbeth turns back to him with a smile, bidding him farewell and promising to see him again tomorrow. Her cheerful demeanor vanishes in an instant. With a quiet tch, she brings a finger to her lips, a sharp, calculating glint in her eyes revealing a hidden side to her personality. At the Imperial Academy, the student dormitories are strictly segregated. A grand, luxurious building houses students from the imperial family and high-ranking nobility. In stark contrast, the lower dorm, reserved for lower-ranking nobles, is a much humbler and older structure. It is here that Prince Rudolf arrives, carrying a box, noting with a grunt how much older the building is than he expected. His presence immediately causes a stir. Two other students rush towards him, utterly shocked. One, the son of the Sovalier family, demands to know why Prince Rudolf is in this dormitory, pointing out that all other members of the imperial family stay in a luxury building. Rudolf calmly replies that he simply decided to stay here. He continues, a faint smile on his face, acknowledging that he wasn't welcome in the other dorm, as expected. However, he reveals the true reason for his choice. This location is closer to the academy, and more importantly, it's where his brother Robin and the descendant of Wilhelm are staying. His new dorm mates are incredulous. The blonde student leaps about dramatically, listing the dorm's miserable conditions, creaking floors, shabby beds, and terrible meals. He questions how a prince of the imperial family could possibly endure such a life, exclaiming that it's depressing just to describe it. The student then reveals the worst part. Since servants aren't allowed, they must deal with bugs themselves. As if on cue, he, the Sovalier's son, and a third student with glasses erupt in panic over a small spider, screaming and flailing. The blonde student yells at Rudolf for not handling the situation properly. In response to their terror, Rudolf calmly cups the spider in his hands, much to their astonishment. He walks to the window and gently releases it outside. He explains that since he was a regular villager before his reincarnation, he's used to such things. The other boys stare, dumbfounded. Their awe quickly transforms into desperate hope. The three students bow before him, pleading for him to be their big brother and take care of the other pests plaguing their rooms, a centipede and a cockroach. Rudolf, however, flatly refuses. But for Prince Rudolf, who had never been relied upon by anyone, this earnest plea sparks an unfamiliar joy. Unable to hide his happiness, he blushes and relents, agreeing to help them after he finishes unpacking. His new dorm mates erupt in celebration. As their grateful cries of "Thanks, big brother" echo from the dormitory, Rudolf shouts back, flustered, for them to stop calling him that. He is startled by his maid, Maya, who stands over him with a strained smile, asking what on earth he is doing. The scene reveals how she arrived. Under a full moon, she scaled a large tree to reach his second-story window. He explains from inside that the boys' dorm is off-limits to women, forcing her to take such measures. She retorts that she wants to ask him the same question, reminding him of the dangerous height as he deals with bugs for his new dorm mates. Later, seated in a garden with Lisbeth, Maya, and the conversation turns serious. He brings up the Anderson family and asks for their opinions, suggesting the most likely explanation for recent events is the breaking of an engagement with his brother, Prince Robin. He continues his analysis, stating that while the fault was entirely Robin's, the Anderson family likely views the cause as the conflict with him, Rudolf. He theorizes that the woman involved then approached him out of resentment, seeking revenge. He concludes that this is the most logical assumption, though his expression hints at underlying doubts. Lisbeth then speaks, promising to clear away any minor pests that cling to him and gently asks him to avoid causing too much trouble. He remains lost in thought, finding it strange that someone seeking revenge would act in such a half-hearted manner. His mind shifts to planning for the immediate future. He outlines his strategy, confirming that servants are allowed in the girls' dorm. He assigns Maya to continue guarding Lisbeth, and will be assigned to guard him, and salutes sharply, acknowledging the order. Lisbeth immediately objects, asking who will guard him in the lower dorm where servants are forbidden. He reassures her, dismissing the threat from Sheila, and then abruptly changes his plan, and is to monitor the Wilhelm descendant in the luxury dorm and report anything suspicious. He then smiles warmly, declaring that more importantly, he wants to enjoy a peaceful school life together with Lisbeth. His sincere words leave Lisbeth, Maya, and blushing and momentarily stunned. His life at the academy began, the grand institution standing tall against a clear sky. It was a whirlwind of new experiences, chaotic meals in the dining hall, spirited moments on the grounds, and quiet, focused hours in the classroom alongside his new peers. Soon after, the homeroom teacher, Boris Armian, gathered the male students in a courtyard. With a stern expression, he announced that they would now conduct a practical lesson. The blonde student noted that the lesson for the boys would be swordsmanship. The Sovalier's son, puffing his chest out, declared that since he comes from a knightly family, he wouldn't lose to his big brother. A nickname the blonde student immediately told him to stop using. The teacher then elaborated on the lesson structure. First, the new students would have a match with upperclassmen swordsmen, warning them to expect a significant gap in skill. Rudolf understood the intent immediately, to put arrogant first years in their place while allowing them to observe advanced techniques against a formidable opponent. The Sauvelier's son, however, paled, realizing with terror that he was going to be killed. As he wondered who his opponent would be, a familiar voice called his name. It was Prince Oscar, who congratulated him on his enrollment and noted they hadn't seen each other since the party. With a friendly smile, Oscar announced that he would be Rudolph's opponent and asked him to go easy. His classmates were stunned. They whispered that Oscar was the best swordsman in the academy, known for his skill with a heavy sword. The Sauvelier's son lamented that his big brother was done for. Rudolph, however, found it interesting, recalling his year of training with Marquis Farkrantz. Facing each other with practice swords, he resolved to see how far his own sword could go against Oscar's. Meanwhile, the academy's curriculum separated the students by gender for practical lessons. While the boys practiced swordsmanship, the girls were in a different classroom for a sewing lesson, instructed to embroider provided patterns. Lisbeth said disk, she was not only separated from Rudolph, but was also forced to do sewing, an activity she was particularly bad at. She was startled from her thoughts when another student, April Svensson, approached her desk with a cheerful demeanor. April asked if she could sit nearby, and Lisbeth, though wary, gave her permission. As she settled in, April's attention was drawn to the handkerchief Lisbeth was working on. With a wistful sigh, she lamented not having a wonderful fiancé of her own. She commented on how close Lisbeth and the prince seemed, admitting her jealousy and asking if the handkerchief was a gift for him. Her friendly facade crumbled in an instant. With a chilling intensity, April asked if Lisbeth knew the reason she lacked a fiancé. The question struck Lisbeth with sudden clarity. This wasn't a friendly gesture. It was an approach born of resentment. She understood that if April sought revenge, her methods seemed half-hearted, but the target wasn't Rudolph. With dawning horror, Lisbeth realized, "It's me." April's shadowed face loomed closer, her voice dripping with malice as she addressed her by name. At the Imperial Academy, April Svensson observes Lisbeth Farkrantz, deducing that the recent schemes were aimed not at Rudolph, but at Lisbeth herself. Lisbeth quietly reflects that being seen with Prince Robin twice made the annulment of her engagement seem inevitable. Noticing her friend's somber expression, April tells her not to look so down. She quickly clarifies that her comment was just a jest, assuring Lisbeth that she doesn't believe for a moment that Prince Robin has any genuine interest in her. Lisbeth turns to her, a hint of surprise on her face. Her surprise gives way to quiet contemplation. As she looks across the nearly empty classroom, she internally expresses her gratitude for the engagement with that man being broken. Her duties, after all, lay with her own territory. The Andizon domain is a vital hub for both trade and defense for the western border, and as its head, she had never felt any need to involve herself with the imperial palace. Her encounters with Prince Robin only reinforced this feeling. She recalls him at a dinner party, a crude and boorish man who was looked down upon by all. Even Sheila, who was present, seemed exasperated by his incompetence. This disdain extended to others of his kind. In another memory, a boorish noble harasses a young woman, crudely offering to make the country girl his bride. Enraged, Lisbeth slams her fist on the table, shouting that he is the lowest of the low for daring to call himself a frontier noble. She declares that only the 10 great families have earned that title. The aftermath of that confrontation was severe. April recalls hearing that Prince Robin had beaten the man soundly, a piece of news she admits she found somewhat satisfying. Returning to the present, she turns to Lisbeth in the quiet classroom and offers her sincere thanks for that day. Her friend's gratitude causes a faint blush to rise on Lisbeth's cheeks as she looks away, flustered. The events marked a victory for Elliot in their second year, setting the stage for what was to come. At the Imperial Academy's training grounds, an instructor calls for the match to begin. First-year student Prince Rudolph is to face second-year student Prince Oscar. Rudolph appears taken aback by the summons, while his older brother Oscar offers a calm, knowing smile. From the sidelines, other students begin to buzz with excitement over the royal duel. One confidently declares that no one would dare bet on the dread Emperor Rudolph, predicting his swift defeat. Nearby, a blonde-haired student clenches his fist, looking on with worry for his Aniki. He and Oscar take their positions, practice, swords in hand. Rudolph speaks first, admitting he's wanted to cross swords with Oscar for some time, since they didn't get a chance to speak at the New Year's party. Oscar smiles faintly, apologizing for declining the invitation back then. His tone shifts as he asks a pointed question. Is Rudolph unconcerned about joining their older brother's faction? Before Rudolph can answer, the two princes settle into their combat stances, the air growing tense. Rudolph surges forward, initiating the duel with a powerful overhead strike. But Oscar parries the blow with ease, recognizing the shallow lunge as a feint. He immediately presses his advantage, forcing a retreating Rudolph to defend against a flurry of counterattacks. The older prince continues his assault, complimenting Rudolph's swordsmanship and correctly guessing he was trained by the Farkrantz family. However, he points out that Rudolph's inexperience against superior opponents is evident. As Rudolph grits his teeth, Oscar anticipates his next move, expecting him to shift to an all-out attack if he feels cornered. The onlookers are stunned by the display. One student marvels at Prince Rudolph's skill, but another clarifies that he is facing Prince Oscar, the strongest fighter in the second year. The blonde student watches, his concern for his brother deepening. Unseen by the crowd below, April Svensson watches the entire confrontation from a nearby window. As she watched the ongoing duel, April Svensson turned to Lisbeth Farkrantz, who was perched on a railing for a better view. April mentioned that Prince Rudolph was sparring with Prince Oscar and asked if Lisbeth wasn't concerned. Lisbeth simply affirmed that she was. She then clarified her stance with unwavering confidence. There was no possibility, in her mind, that Rudolph would lose. With that settled, she declared her intention to focus on her embroidery. Her devotion prompted a dreamy sigh from April, who remarked on how much Lisbeth truly loved the prince. Lisbeth could only offer a flustered sound in response, as April found the display of affection almost too much to bear. She then leaned closer, a playful glint in her eye, and confessed that she had initially considered stealing Rudolph away as a prank. She added, however, that her name had indeed been officially added to the list of his potential fiancés. The revelation struck Lisbeth with the force of a physical blow, leaving her speechless and horrified. April quickly reassured the stunned Lisbeth, explaining that she no longer had such intentions, especially since the prince showed no interest in her whatsoever. Just then, Sheila appeared behind them. April, still holding a grudge, muttered that she still disliked Sheila. Unfazed, Sheila cheerfully suggested they should try to get along. Her attention then shifted to Lisbeth's handiwork. Holding up the embroidery hoop, which displayed a chaotic jumble of threads, Sheila asked if it was meant to be a portrait of Prince Rudolph. A nervous Lisbeth confirmed that it was. The question sent Lisbeth into a spiral of despair. Clutching the hoop, she began to cry, lamenting that she knew she was clumsy, unladylike, and not at all cute. April watched with concern, calling out her name. Sheila, however, took a more practical approach. She began to calmly offer detailed advice, explaining that Lisbeth's design was too complex. She instructed her to focus on a simpler motif, ensure the fabric was stretched tightly, and master the basics first. Sheila's patient guidance promised that with time, Lisbeth would surely improve, stunning her into silence. Impressed, Lisbeth asked Sheila to teach her more. Sheila agreed, though she noted that her own mother or Maya were likely better instructors. Filled with renewed determination, Lisbeth declared she would do her best. In her enthusiasm, however, her hand slipped, and she jabbed her finger with the needle, causing April to gasp in alarm. She had finished it. The embroidery hoop held a completed piece, a charming depiction of a dark-haired girl and a light-haired boy holding hands, surrounded by sparkling stitches. Her success was met with joyous celebration. April threw her arms around Lisbeth, exclaiming that she'd done it, that her first-ever embroidery had taken shape so beautifully. Nearby, Sheila watched them with a gentle smile. As the moment of triumph settled, Lisbeth's attention shifted to the front of the classroom where the sewing teacher stood. Hesitantly, she called out to Sheila. She approached her directly, offering a sincere apology for her earlier rudeness and thanking her for the instruction. Her expression earnest and hopeful. Lisbeth then made a heartfelt request, asking if, from this point forward, they could try to be on good terms. Sheila's gentle demeanor vanished in an instant. Her eyes widened in shock before hardening into a glare. She snapped at Lisbeth, demanding to know if she truly understood what she was asking and questioning how many times she would have to repeat herself. Before the tense confrontation could escalate, a powerful shout echoed through the air, commanding them to stop. The scene shifts abruptly to a training ground under a starry sky. Two young men are locked in a stalemate, kneeling with their wooden practice swords pressed firmly against each other's throats. They remain frozen in the deadlock, sweat dripping from their faces as they pant from exertion, neither one able to gain an advantage over the other. The instructor, a man with a dark goatee, looks out at the sparring princes. He announces that time is up, leaving the students watching. The Sauvelier's son, the one with glasses, and the blonde-haired youth, in tense silence as they await the official judgment. He bellows the result across the training grounds. A draw. The crowd of students erupts, some shouting in disbelief. One complains loudly that this outcome nullifies his bet, questioning how Prince Oscar could only manage a draw. As the crowd reacts, Prince Oscar leans on his training sword to catch his breath. The blonde student rushes to his side, asking if he's all right. He reassures the prince that he fought valiantly, even if he didn't secure a victory. He, however, knows the truth. With a bead of sweat on his brow, Oscar thinks to himself that it's not true. He was supposed to lose. He realizes that his brother, Rudolph, is still far from his reach. Just then, Rudolph approaches, wiping his face with a cloth and smiling. He praises Oscar's strength, admitting he was on edge because Oscar came at him with genuine intent despite the request to go easy. Extending a hand, he says he looks forward to their future as brothers, leaving Oscar momentarily speechless. He thanks Oscar, noting that his brother is an unfathomable person who was hiding his true strength. Rudolph explains that forcing a situation where he let Oscar win would have ultimately damaged his brother's reputation, so a draw was the best outcome. As he speaks, a group of burly trainees approaches them. One exclaims that Prince Rudolph's performance was magnificent. Another adds that they themselves couldn't win against Prince Oscar, let alone fight him to a draw. Oscar looks on, confused by their sudden appearance and praise. The trainees then bow deeply in perfect unison. Their leader formally apologizes for their previous rudeness, admitting they were unaware that Prince Rudolph possessed such incredible talent. Oscar watches the display, stunned by the complete reversal of their attitude. He finally understands Rudolph's true intention. By engineering a draw, his brother hadn't lowered Oscar's reputation at all. Instead, he had dramatically elevated his own. Oscar's estimation remained high, while Rudolph skyrocketed. The blonde student remarks to Oscar that things turned out exactly as he had predicted. Overhearing them, Rudolph turns with a knowing smile and asks his brother, right? He is suddenly confronted by a group of students in a large, ornate room. A girl with glasses, looking flustered, remarks that with his current reputation, he could easily serve as a student council officer. Her exclamation echoes through the hall, catching him completely off guard. Before he can process this, a dark-haired young man perched casually on a desk welcomes him to the student council. Another student with spiky blonde hair admonishes the dark-haired one for sitting on the furniture. Rudolph stands frozen, realizing with dismay that he has been cornered into joining the student council, an entanglement he desperately wanted to avoid as it would only draw unwanted attention. The blonde student tells him not to be so tense, while the dark-haired one casually informs him that he is slated to become the next student council president. The girl with glasses explains that this position is traditionally held by a member of the imperial family. Another female student adds that she would be happy if he joined, even if not by force. The series of revelations leaves Rudolph utterly stunned. The second girl continues, stating that his brother, Prince Robin, is certainly not suitable for the role. The thought of Robin's arrogant face flashes through Rudolph's mind, and he silently agrees. The blonde student emphatically concurs, shouting that Robin is out of the question. He elaborates that Rudolph's conduct has improved and, more importantly, he possesses skills comparable to Prince Oscar's. With these qualifications, he declares, there can be no objections to his appointment. Rudolph remains silent, taking the unified front of the council members. The dark-haired student then asks him what is wrong, correctly guessing that Rudolph believes he is being used to bridge the gap with Prince Oscar's faction. Though he doesn't say it aloud, Rudolph confirms this internally, reaffirming his resolve not to join. Leaning in close, the student whispers the political reality of the situation. He explains that it would be disastrous if someone from Prince Frederick's faction who is friendly with Oscar were to join. He reminds Rudolph of the student council's unwritten rule. Factional disputes are strictly forbidden. He then reveals that his own older brother was the president last year, and he served as the vice president, and they worked well together. Rudolph listens intently, the weight of the student's argument settling upon him. With the matter seemingly settled, formal introductions begin. The girl with glasses presents herself as Crystal Svensson, the accountant. The energetic blonde student follows, announcing himself as D. Lick McGregor, in charge of general affairs. A pair of polished shoes strides purposefully forward, marking a decisive step into a new, unforeseen role. Inside the student council room, Prince Rudolph waits with the other members. Crystal Svensson remarks that the class seems to be running long and wonders about the vice president's whereabouts. Rudolph, however, is impatient. He just wants to offer a quick greeting and leave, as Lisbeth is waiting for him back in the classroom. As he thinks this, the heavy door to the room creaks open. A young man with reddish-brown hair strides in, carrying a stack of documents and a briefcase. As he walks, the briefcase slips from his grasp and clatters onto the polished floor. His arrival startles Crystal, who exclaims, "Wilhelm Sama." She questions why he is there, stating that it's already too late. Rudolph's eyes widen at the mention of the name Wilhelm. Realizing her slip, Crystal quickly apologizes and turns to formally introduce the prince. The newcomer, Wilhelm, ignores her fluster and cheerfully begins introductions. He presents a young, dark-haired boy as the son of the Duke's crier, and then introduces himself as the student council president, Wilhelm von Sovelier. His gaze settles on Rudolph, a confident smile playing on his lips. He formally welcomes the fourth prince to the student council, adding that this will be fun.